Nozipo's computer. There's an issue with my PC. So
okay.
I don't know if my camera is on, Chair. So good morning to you also. So just to let you know,
I can't see you. I just see a red screen there. Perhaps switch it, the camera on and off again.
That's off, Chair. That's
yeah.
on.
If you switch it on, it's a red screen. Okay, that's off. Okay, we're going to start the meeting. A good meeting starts on time and ends on time. There you are. We see you now, DG. And there's Nozipo behind you. Yeah, let's start the meeting. Good morning, members. It's Monday, the 7th of December. My name is Ricardo Mackenzie. Welcome to the Standing Committee on the Premier and Constitutional Matters. Today, we are here to deliberate on the annual report of the Department of the Premier and Constitutional Matters. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues or members of this committee just to introduce themselves, just so we know who's the officials also know who's in the meeting. Members, you're free to introduce yourself.
Morning, Chair Cameron Dugmore and colleagues.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson and the Premier and officials, Regan Allen.
Good morning, Chairperson, Premier, members and officials, Wendy Philander.
Thank you. I've got my team also with me today. Lizette Kluter is on my team, one of my team members here. And then Wasima Kamesh Ahmad is also joining us here from the team from Parliament side. I'm going to hand over to the Premier and his team to introduce themselves, and then I'll just set the tone and the guidelines for the meeting before we proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair Alan Wendy, Premier. Good morning, everybody and honourable members. I will hand over now to the Director General, Dr. Malila.
Good morning, Premier. Harry Malila. I'm the Director General and the Accounting Officer for the department. Chair, do you wish each member to introduce themselves, or do you want me to introduce the team?
Let them introduce themselves so we know who's here. We haven't seen them in a long time.
Thank you very much, Chair.
And please turn your mic, your camera, if your bandwidth allows it.
Good morning, Chairperson, members, Premier, colleagues, Andre Jumat.
Good morning, everyone. It's Hildegard Vos. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson, Henriette Robson.
Good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. Mrs. Blücher from Legal Services.
Good morning, Chairperson, Premier and members, colleagues, Michael Hendrickse, People Management.
Good morning, Chairperson and members, Marsha Corson, Strategic Program.
Good morning, Chairperson and members, Hilton Arendse, Centre for Innovation.
Good morning, Chairperson, members, Driekus Person, CFO.
Good morning, everybody. Almo Geldenhuys, Director, Departmental Strategy.
That's everyone.
Hello, Zenith, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. I'm Zenith Ishmael, Strategic Management Information. Thank you.
Thank you. Two people haven't introduced themselves, Renee and Robert.
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Robert Shaw, Officer of the DG.
Good morning, Chairperson. Faisal Stein, Corporate Communications.
Thank you, everyone. I see Clarence also joining us, one of our colleagues here from Parliament. And then obviously Nozipia was with the DG earlier on, so we know she's here. Thank you, members. We're going to start the meeting because we've got a long session ahead of us. Just for the guidelines and the rules of this meeting, first of all, let me just welcome the Premier again and the head of department or any member of the public if they're here or those listening via YouTube. Terms of rules 2.1 to 2.4, the rules on the Standing Committee on Virtual Meetings. All members are to be muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid any background noises. All the officials as well, please. Please, members, flag your point of order in the chat function of MS Teams. We'll ask everyone to switch off their audios and videos just to improve the quality of the connection. However, if you do speak, please put on your microphone and your camera, not to embarrass you, but just to know who is speaking to and who's speaking to us. Please switch off your mic once you finish speaking. Please switch off your mic once you finish speaking. People have too much faith in the mute button, so please make sure that it's switched off. We heard many things once the mute button was supposedly switched off, so please do switch it off. We're starting with the annual report of the Department of the Premier. What we'll ask the Premier to do is him and the DG just to do some introductory remarks. And then members, and for anyone else listening or watching this, the way we're going to conduct the annual report this morning, we're starting on Part A. Part A is the general information that's on, and perhaps if you can bookmark it on your site, anyone who's got a book or the email documentation, page 6 to page number 32. And after that, we're starting with Part B, which is page 36 to 106. And after that, we will start with Part D, which is page 128 to page 164. The rest of the book, as is standard practice in this Parliament, the Standing Committee of Public Accounts will deal with those matters. So Part A, B, and D, if you can please bookmark those sections within the email document or in the hard copy, depending which one you have in front of you. And we'll ask questions on that. And if there are members of the public or any other individual wishing to raise questions, we'll do that afterwards. I'm going to hand over to the Premier and to the head of department just to make some opening remarks, please. Premier Windy.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the members of the committee. Obviously, here for presentation is our annual report. Looking back at when the forward was written, obviously in the middle of the pandemic, but of course the pandemic only touched at the end of this annual report. Once again, thank you very much from my side to the team. We once again received a clean audit. Of course, this report, the Department of the Premier, offering services not only within one department, but of course these services across the whole of government, from legal services to human resources to governance. Whether we are looking at our good governance or forensics, legal advice. So obviously, as a department, making sure it's not only just one single department, but the whole of government. And there again, I think also about the projects within this department. I think about the broadband rollout. So you would have seen, further rollout in the broadband. Only at the end of the year, a little bit of issues that we weren't able to deal with, and you would have also heard that now when we reported to you in the adjustment, because some of our business was curtailed. But I think in general you will see again, perhaps also just to mention the Children's Commissioner setting that up, getting it going. And of course, we understand that some of the pressures, but it seems, and I also must thank the department at the same time for what they've managed to achieve in getting all of these things going, despite some of these pressures. Chair, I don't want to spend too much time. We say we've got a whole day, but or quite a few hours, but we've got a huge thick book to get through. So I think I'll just leave it at that. We have the full team here, and we're very happy to answer any of these questions that any of the members have on this report. And perhaps just hand over directly now to the Director General, and just whether he wants to highlight any of the issues that we've got in this report, and then we can get into the actual detail of the meat of the report. Thank you, Chair. DG, hand over to you.
Thank you, Premier. Again, good morning to you, Chair, Mr. Mackenzie, and also to all the members of this committee, and also good morning to the team in the Department of Premier. Chair, you will also note that we've asked basically the program managers to be here, so we don't have everyone here because obviously there are people that's also got other work to do. Just to note, Chair, that I've put together my accounting officer report that is set out from page 14 and it goes right through to page 23. It deals with the operations of the department, and maybe just to indicate and to connect to what the Premier said, obviously a big part of the year started, with where we left off in the previous term, finishing obviously the previous PSP with a focus on PSG5, and you will recall, Chair, that's been a policy around embedding good governance. And obviously it dealt with the issue around enhanced governance through efficient and effective responsive local government. Immediately after the new cabinet was appointed, we focused then obviously on putting together a PSP that consisted out of 5 VIPs. The one for .P obviously focused on innovation and culture, and that's particularly VIP 5. And we're driving that together with the Treasury as well as the Department of Local Government and the Department of Environmental. Apology for that, Chair. Obviously, Chair, a lot of our operations were focused on particularly the end around the COVID pandemic. And in fact, chairs have reported previously, this whole department actually jumped in boots and all in trying to help, particularly when we were dealing with the first surge of COVID around the middle of March or so. Chair, you will also see that we've got 5 programs, obviously Executive Governance Integration Program 1. Program 2 focuses on provincial strategic management. Program 3 focuses on people management and all the HR responsibilities, and it's not just a focus obviously on the department of the Premier, but it's a transversal program sitting within the CSC. Then program 4 focusing on e-innovation, so it's all our IT requirement and also the innovation stuff around CEI. And then program 5 deals with corporate assurance, and the 2 key branches in there is obviously the corporate governance branch that's headed up by Ms. Robson, and then also legal services. Chair, you will see on page 17 and 18 is our revenue and expenditure, and I just want to highlight 2 things. Our total expenditure amounted to 98.6%, so that's as close as a person can get. A portion of obviously the underspending resulted as a result of COE, so that staff savings, because people, some people have left right at the end, and there were 2 amounts and also, Chair, that we had to deal with as compulsory savings. Page 18 also sets out the environment rollovers, and then obviously key, Chair, we'll probably deal with that when we deal with the other parts during SCOPA, is the whole issue around unauthorized, irregular and fruitless expenditure. But then also just to note that this vote didn't have any unauthorized expenditure in the year under review, and then there are some small cases around irregular expenditure that we're still investigating, and also possible fruitless and wasteful, but I'm not going to go into that detail because we'll deal with that later on. Chair, there's an extensive part that we've written in relation to our future plans on page 18 and 19. Premier also touched on it. A lot of it is to do with where we're going with VIP 5, particularly innovation and culture, both within the HR space and also into in our policy environment, and particularly also within CI. Chair, you will also note on page 20 and 21 that deals with public-private partnerships. We don't have any in this department. We've got no activities that were discontinued. In fact, we focused on a lot of new things in the year rather than discontinuing it. The Premier touched on the fact that the Children Commissioner has been appointed only in this financial year, but obviously we concluded all the processes, including legislation, in the previous year. And then lastly, Chair, we didn't have any unsolicited bids. Just a second last point I want to make, Chairs, obviously there are some exemptions and deviations from National Treasury. The one major one that's been issued by the National Minister of Finance, obviously an extension on the 2 months granted for the deadlines of submission of annual reports that I've actually included in it, and it's because of COVID, and that's for the whole of the public service. And then lastly, Chair, on my report, page 22-23, sets out just some of the major events after the reporting period. A lot of it obviously relates to the work that this department had to do as it relates to COVID and the support that this department had to provide, particularly to the executive. And on many of those reports, Chair, we have already reported to this committee as part of Q1, Q2, and the Q3 activities. So, Chair, I mean, I'm quite chuffed, I think, with the performance of this department, particularly during difficult times. And I am confident, and to the best of my knowledge, what is in this report represents, what we've done during the year, noting that there's still a tough year ahead, this particular year. And obviously, we need to relook, raise our heads a bit, and refocus on what we've put together, particularly within our PSP, never mind all the other challenges that we had to deal with. Chair, so from the accounting officer side, that is my overview that I would like to present to this committee, and we are open now to any comments and questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malila and the Premier. We're going to open up for questions. Member, on the overview, do we have any question on the overview? And if we can take the overview, including page 6 to now page 13, and if you don't mind, with the Director General's report as well, up to page 16. If we can take that together, then we deal with the overview and with the forwards at the same time. Thank you. Honorable Regan Allen, you can go ahead.
Good morning, Chairperson. In terms of your direction, I think firstly, I would want to commend the department and the Premier for the audit outcome, and well done on that achievement. With the pages that you have directed, I have one in terms of the Wi-Fi hotspots that has been rolled out on page 13 is made mention of it. I wanted to ascertain if there is a potential breakdown in terms of where those hotspots are, if it's within each and every region, obviously taking into account that the rural areas is in need of Wi-Fi and to be connected, but if we can get an understanding of those public Wi-Fi hotspots. Thank you. That's all on those pages. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Dugmore.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'd also like to join Member Allen in congratulating the accounting officer and the department and the Premier on the clean audit outcomes. I think it is encouraging that the example is set by this department. I would like to ask whether, and this is in the Premier's forward, that the 5 VIP focus areas that are mentioned, the building of safe and cohesive communities, the economy and jobs, empowering people, mobility, spatial transformation and human settlements, and then the innovation and culture, just like to ask the Premier whether those 5 remain the VIP focus areas of this government. Obviously, it was so for this period under review, but just whether those remain as is. Then, when we look at the in the Premier's forward, the description of the Wi-Fi hotspot strategy, when one reads that 120,000 people have gained access to the internet each month. When one looks at the population of the Western Cape, which is around 7 million, you know, that 120,000 amounts to 1.7%. Obviously, that includes everyone, not just, say, youth above 15 or so on. And that just seems an incredibly low number. If one looks at it, is only 120,000 people who have access to the internet each month. Is that a figure that the province is happy with? Is there any mention in the annual performance plan, which unfortunately I don't have with me at the moment? What is the actual target? Because I think later on in the documentation, there's reference to, I think, about a target of wanting to reach, I think it's 1,600 Wi-Fi hotspots. But what is the number in terms of people having access to the internet that is the target of this department? Because I'm sure only having 1.7% of people in the Western Cape having access to the internet each month is really an incredibly low figure. Then also in the Premier's introduction, he refers to the issue of the surveys, which are conducted to test the, you know, when people are phoning in and the issues that they raise. And the Premier makes mention in his forward of the 10 most important issues that have been raised in regard to, you know, people phoning in through the call centers and so on. You will see that on page, I think it's page 13. The Premier refers to monthly reports detailing the top 10 issues identified are then shared with the appropriate departments. So could we just have a sense as to what are those top 10 issues? If you take the months in the year under review, what were the 10 top issues that were identified by the public and which were then shared with the appropriate departments so that they could look at improvements? Chair, do you want us to continue with the DG's section as well, or shall we just stop at the Premier?
I'll continue with the DG section as well.
Yeah. Just to say that, I mean, the vision for the province being a safe Western Cape where everyone prospers. I mean, in the view of the DG, given the crime stats, you know, it's clear to me that we are very, very far away from that particular vision of a safe Western Cape, and clearly the prosperity issue has been impacted now by COVID. So I'd just like to ask the DG, in terms of the key constraining factors to secure safety, which is a fundamental part of the provincial vision, you know, what would he see those key constraints that are actually blocking us from reaching this particular, and then also on page 17, there's reference to bad debt, a bad debt that was actually scrapped. If we could just get a sense of what was that bad debt for on page 17. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Philander.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chairperson, in terms of the overview of operations on page 15, mention is made of the tight management in terms of the filling of vacancies, and obviously due to the fiscal environment. Chairperson, I would just like to know on which programs did that impact the most? And then also in terms of the current capacity within the department, were there any attempts on developing the skills within the department then? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I just want to add two questions. that I also had and linked to one of the questions. One is a Premier on member Dagmo's question on those top 10 issues that that are being identified. Does that feed into a new strategy going forward? Because obviously people identify key issues. Let's say, for example, April 2019 last year, and you then say, guys, the top 10 issues is actually not what we as government thought it was. These are the top 10 issues out of all the calls that we received. Let's rework the strategy. Is there such a process taking place with you and in your department, and where does that process sit? And then my second question would be to the Director General on the safety issue as well. We've obviously know the law enforcement officers, etc. And part of this strategy, do you sit in, obviously we know the detail in this would be Department of Communities Safety, but the overall strategy is part of what you put in this document. Do you sit in on that forum? I'm just trying to get an understanding. Are you chairing that meeting, the safety meeting, and obviously the interaction with the city of Cape Town? Is that something that you measure, and how do you measure it going forward? Obviously, you started last year, August, I think, but going forward, how do you measure it? How do you, how are you being held accountable within the Premier, within your key performance areas to make sure this happens? Thank you. And over to the Premier, then the DG.
There we go. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the honourable members for those questions. I'll try to answer many of them and then also hand back to the DG, as well as I presume even others will come in. So first of all, the Honourable Alan on the hotspots. I think first of all, if you go onto our website, you can actually have a look at, there's a GIS map of those hotspots, so you can zoom in onto each of those ones, specifically the ones in the rural areas. You can see exactly where they are. And of course, remember in the broadband strategy, there's the hotspots that are at various centers, but then there's also the schools connectivity. Remember, it's not only just the going into different centers across the province, it goes to also schools, which is where the big numbers lie. But you can see that on our website, you can zoom in on each of those various hotspots. When it comes to the question, thank you very much to the Honourable Dugmore, the question on the VIPs versus, in actual fact, the three focus areas in recovery. And of course, those VIPs are still in place. That is actually how the whole structure of government is, or has been wired from our initial plans. But I think, as we've also said over the last while, that the recovery post COVID-19, and I say post-COVID-19 reservedly. Also, if I go back to, when the forward was written, we were kind of really looking to the end of COVID-19 and the recovery plan. And right now we find ourselves in the province is in a resurgence space. So, the questions that we're asking ourselves at the moment are, where are we going to be rolling out vaccine centers, and have we got the logistics in place for vaccines, and how do we get the approvals, and obviously that's partnership between national and province, and how do we get that right? And those are the strategic discussions we're having at the moment. But and that also will affect definitely our plan, our 5-year plan that was put on the table, the VIPs, and even within those VIPs, what we can focus on based on recovery. And I think we've taken the committee through the three focus areas in the recovery plan, but also even that 5-year plan in having to look at how we rejig government going forward, because it is a very difficult environment right now. We've just gone through an adjustment. We're busy between now and obviously the end of March having to put our budgets together with that 5-year plan, and much of it is not going to be able to be delivered on, because we have to make these tough choices, and some things are going to be stopped, and some things, new things, are going to have to be started. And I think, well, I'll get now to how the top 10 issues get dealt with. Then on the point raised by Honourable Dugmore about the 120,000, I'm sure the team can also answer that. but it also depends on the window and what you're measuring. So if you're measuring just the rollout of some of these centres and the usage in rural areas, I remember a report. I think it was a report last year with 900,000. So it depends on what you're measuring, but I'm sure the team can also come in. Obviously, also remember that where we are rolling out is not where the mainline data systems, the private sector, roll it out. So if you go to one of our centres in Claastroom or in these really tiny rural areas that we've put these centres in, obviously there's not a lot of users, and so but we'll also give you an update exactly what those numbers are. Then if I look at the question on the 10 issues as raised, obviously it's the issues that come up via First Thursdays. Those get distributed to each of those departments, and of course First Thursdays in this period are quite different to First Thursdays right now. First Thursdays in this period, we used to mainly hold inside the underneath of the archways in our own building, and obviously we would have the report that would come out, but it would actually go directly to those departments, because each of those departments would be sitting there with their ministers, with their HODs and various members of that department sitting at those tables, interacting directly with the public. And of course, that would have an influence over time, because two things would happen. One is there would be individual issues that would need to be fixed, but the other would be, going more to the chair's question, is how does it influence strategy? And whether it's those touch points, or whether it's the overall big data issues that get pulled in from both international, national, and local analyses that gets done. So, for example, when we were going through our focus on the recovery areas, I would say that the top 10 issues as far as strategy, perhaps not as directly influenced versus the kind of data that Dr. Fast would be putting on the table in those strategy sessions, that would come from overall views on the impact of COVID-19 right now and on rural women and employment, because they were the hardest hit. So those wouldn't necessarily come through a call center, or like we run COVID-19 at the moment on a radio station. So, I mean, in a way, I'm sure it would over time influence strategy, but I think more so the bigger overall studies influence strategy more. I think I've answered the ones that I can. I'm going to hand over to the DG. If there are any others, then we can just refer it back to me. Thank you. DG.
Thank you, Premier. Also, thanks to the members for the question. Maybe just to add on what the Premier has indicated. I mean, if we look at the top 10 issues that's been raised, and as Premier said, there are various sources where we're getting that information from. Obviously, during the period, it's related to obviously Corona. There was also the issue around many local government matters. It's quite amazing, the amount of issues we're getting, through our own system. And then, importantly, the issue on jobs, fines, tenders, housing, and then safety. And I think, Chair, the point that I want to make here is you can see on all these matters, it's reflected in our key strategy. So safety is a key issue that we're focusing on. It's been part of the 5 VIPs. It's now obviously part of our recovery plan process. Jobs, definitely one of our major priority areas, and then obviously the issue around service delivery, and obviously housing, and the issue around Corona is coming through our dignity theme. Chair, then in relation to just the issue that's been raised by Member Doug Moore on the whole issue around internet penetration, and I mean the Premier made the point around connectivity. It's not only related to the 120,000 people. What one must understand, Chair, is that we give access to about 1,900 schools, as an example, or 1,900 schools in the province have access to our system. So you can do the math and the numbers, and you can actually then see what the internet penetration actually is currently in the system. And then in addition to that, and we will talk about it when we get later in our annual reports on the service delivery improvement plan, you will see, Chair, there's over 70 e-centers where we're providing people with access to. There's also more than 200 rural libraries. And obviously the e-centers also spread across the province. And we're also giving kids, particularly access through our rural library program, and we call it the Rural Library Connectivity Program. So we're quite serious, I think, as a department, as far as it relates to giving people access to information, and particularly through our Wi-Fi system. So that, I think, Chair, then takes care of the two questions that have been raised by member Doug Moore, and maybe I should just deal with the other question that's been raised, particularly for myself. Safety, Chen, you will see when we table the PSP, safety is the #1 priority of this province. And I mean, if we look at the stats and all the stuff, if one kind of turn your head away from that, I mean, you will not know what the reality actually on the ground is. So we're having a big focus on it. And you're well aware, Chair, that when the Premier also tabled the PSP, we had a specific plan around safety. And I mean, part of that plan was a focus obviously on law enforcement, and it was the rollout, together with the city, of some of our law enforcement enhancement programs, and particularly in the vulnerable areas. And the vulnerable areas obviously also being informed by what some of the stats are saying. But Chair, there's a much greater focus also now on particularly how do we prevent crime. Okay, so how do we go into the system and rather not wait until the crime happens, but rather, work with communities and actually prevent crime. And we also have come to the realization that part of crime is also a public health issue. So at the moment, part of our safety plan is a close collaboration between the Department of Health and the Department of Community Safety. And I think I've also briefed this committee that between those two HODs, they are now responsible under the recovery plan to drive our whole strategy around crime. But they don't work on their own. We work with the South African Police Services. We work with neighborhood watches. We work with communities, because we also realize, Chair, that as government, we cannot address crime on its own. So we've got the hotspot areas, and in addition to that, we also work with the respective municipalities, not only the City of Cape Town, but we also work with the district municipalities through their respective district plans, and then obviously closely with some of the social partners, particularly the religious institutions, the Department of Education, the Department of Social Development, and also the Department of Transport and Public Works, particularly through the Chrysalis programs, and also some of the law enforcement initiatives under the umbrella of traffic. And then there's also a leg, Chair, that actually deals with how our human settlements have been put together, and maybe the requirement to start to relook at those things. So from where I'm sitting, Chair, I think some of the constraining environment is definitely the issue around capacity. And I mean, we've raised this issue around capacity of police quite a lot, particularly when the national minister also visited us, and in our engagement, particularly also with the president, is just the issue around, the number of police officials that's also been allocated to this province. But we also realize it's not just about law enforcement. And then the last point is obviously working very, very close with police on the issue around data, so that our interventions are actually led by data. So we're not just running after, old stats, as some people would maybe say, but we actually have data that feeds into the system, and we assess it continuously. And obviously we're working very closely, particularly with the City of Cape Town, around issues. Chair, then the question, I think you've also raised the question in relation to safety. We're definitely part of that. I mean, the safety plan is a joint project between the Premier as well as Minister Fritz. In the initial periods, I mean, if the Premier chaired, as an example, the safety meetings, the Premier chairs the safety cabinet. Minister Fritz obviously now chairs the meeting where we discuss the safety plan with regards to all the officials, and some of the municipalities also dialing in. The team of the Department of the Premier works with the respective VIPs, and also as part of the recovery plan, work with the safety team. And as I've indicated, also at the PTM level. Myself as the DG, that's also where I pull all the stuff together. And then at the cabinet level, every 5th week, we only deal with the matters around particularly the recovery plan, and safety is one of those priority areas. And as I've indicated previously, it's not just the Western Cape government, but we also invite external parties like the South African Police Service, the City of Cape Town, and we're also pulling in even people from the justice system and also, from the prison environment, because we believe it's a whole of government and a whole of society that's required to address the issue. And then obviously when we talk about the budget and the planning stuff, we also pull them into the medium-term budget policy committee processes. Chair, then there was a last question from member Philander around the vacancies. And I think this is also something that we discussed in our last session when we get to, I think it's part D of the report. When we deal, part D of the report, when we deal with people management issues, we will particularly look at obviously where the highest vacancy rates are. But from where I'm sitting, Chair, at the moment, it's really a trade-off between having sufficient money available to proceed with some of these posts. So you can even see within my overview, I've highlighted the fact that we've put together our own budget committee. We look at critical positions in the department, and what we also have done recently, we're also starting to use people in different areas. So if you look at the learnings from COVID, where people were doing different kind of work to actually assist us, we're now in the department also exploring ways of developing people's skills more broadly and asking them to also work in different areas from where they are generally working. So as an accounting officer, between myself, the SG, and also the CFO, we've got a budget committee. If any component wants to fill a particular position, they need to come and defend it, because quite plainly, Chair, we do not have the funding at the moment or over the MTF to actually fill all our positions. So the point I want to make here is that we look at the critical post and we actually deal with that as a first attempt, and obviously trying to reuse and use some of our skills across the department. The entire management team is aware of it, Chair. We've had long discussions around it, because moving forward, I think we're going to be under tremendous constraint. So, Chair, I think that's a response. I might want to just ask Hilton if there's anything that he wants to say, because I think there were some questions, particularly on the stuff around CI, Wi-Fi, hotspots, and then maybe Hilton just shortly, on some of the service and stuff that you're doing in your space, Chair, if you would allow that. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, DG. I do not think I can add much to DG. DG responded quite well to the questions on the Wi-Fi hotspot, where we have the penetration cannot just be checked or measured in terms of the Wi-Fi hotspot, but we need to look at all of the other services that we're rendering. As all our rural libraries are connected to the corporate network, so we have in each one of those libraries we have connectivity, and also in our Cape Access Centers we have our people who have access to internet connectivity, and then obviously our employees, once they're in our environment and in the work environment, they're also exposed to the guest Wi-Fi that we provide in the corporate environment. So in that sense, we have a larger penetration at just the 1.7%. What the DG, specifically at our planning session on Friday, has indicated is that we need to focus more on the outcomes of our performances. And at this stage, as you can see in our targets and what we've put out there, we've started with the process of looking at the outcomes, and that's why we've got the 120,000. But we also now need to look at quantifying the outcomes pertaining to all of the other means of internet penetration into our communities, and that will be part of our new annual performance plan, where we focus on what's the impact and what is the outcome in the communities in terms of access. DJ, I do not know if there's anything else that you want us to focus on, but that is the key one that I've picked up in the questions that's been asked. The Premier covered the issue of the Wi-Fi hotspots per region, and the Premier did indicate that it's on the website, but we also in a previous recent standing committee meeting, it was also requested, and Nozipo is in the process of providing that to the standing committee. So that list will come through within this week. Thanks, DG.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hilton. I think that report should be on the way to us. I'm not sure if you got, but yeah, you're right. We did request it in the last committee. DG, can I just ask just one follow-up question before I hand over to the members? In one of the, with regards to the safety, and I think one of the targets or one of the visions obviously was a safe Western Cape where everyone prospers. Now, obviously, I don't expect you to be held accountable for the number of less murders, if there's or the number of reduced crime stats in Yanga or Langa or anything else. I mean, that is obviously within the ambit of the police. What I'm just trying to get from my perspective is, in your meetings with your, like you say, you meet every 5th week, or you put the item on safety on your agenda. How do you, with your colleagues, with the other HODs, interact, or what is the targets or the accountability measures you set for yourself to ensure that this item, as part of the Premier's vision, and you being the chief official for this province, what measurables do you put in place? And I think that's just what I'm trying to understand from my perspective. And then the second question on it, if you look, for example, one of the other, and I'm referring here to page 19, where people management says enabled a citizen-centric culture. And one of the measurable tools I think they use is the assessment surveys, which is the Barrett survey, I think it's called. And I think that is one of the measuring tools there. So I'm just trying to understand, what do you or your interactions with safety and security, what measurement tools do you put in place with your colleagues in trying to keep this item alive? And then on the Wi-Fi hotspots, can you just share with us where's the latest on that Neotel contract? Because obviously in our previous term, that contract was up and running. And is there sort of a new or a different look that this is going to take going forward? Say, waiting on this contract to run out, and I think Hilton is obviously here, so you probably have more details. Where are we in the contract? I can't remember. Are we in year 3, 4, 5? What is the remaining term? And if you don't have those details here with us, you're welcome to, as a committee, we can make a resolution afterwards and just get those written reports from you in the next few weeks. And I say there's a follow-up question before you answer, Member Dagmore.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Chair, I'd asked in regard to the 120,000 people accessing the internet each month. What is the actual target? I mean, I take the point that in our schools, there is also learners accessing the internet. It'll be interesting to actually get a figure for that. But in regard to the 630 hotspots in the APP, my question is, was there a target set? And if there wasn't a target set, what is the target that the CEI or the Department of the Premier would like to see? How many people would they like to see accessing the internet via these 630 hotspots? That's my question. And then, Chair, I'm not sure whether in the section we're dealing with now, are you also covering page 27 to 28, which is a strategic overview? Is that where are you there, or is that going to be in the next round?
Let's just give them to answer this time, Member Darkman, and then we'll take the second round up to page 32, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. DG, you can continue.
Chair, no, thank you for those questions. Hilton, you can respond to the ones around the hotspots and also the target setting. The point I want to make, also, Member Darkmore, and I mean, it's a discussion that I had with the Exco team on Friday, past Friday. And what we're looking at is not just the mere number of people having access. I mean, the challenge for us as an entire team is to look at the impact of what it means if people have access to the internet. So we do not only want to measure to say, let's say 120,000 people had access, but we want to know, as an example, what do they look for? What has been the impact, and how did the system actually help them, and not just them as individuals, but maybe even their households, to actually improve their livelihood. So to me, that is also an important issue in relation to setting outputs that is actually outcome orientated, but Hilton can talk to that a little bit. Hilton, if you can maybe just also deal with the Neotel contract in terms of where we are at the moment. But Chair, the point I want to say is obviously that contract is still running for the next 4 years or so, but Hilton can say exactly where it is. We've already started internal discussion to say 4 years goes quite quickly. What is it that we want to see in about 4 years from now? We are also challenging ourselves with regards to saying we've concluded this contract, let's say 6 years or so ago, but the environment has also changed. So to what extent do we actually respond to the environment, and to what extent do we actually ask Neotel also to respond to the environment? You're also aware, Chair, that there are also massive opportunities out there where the private sector is also starting to get involved now in rolling out broadband to many of our communities and to many of our poorer communities. So what does it mean, for our broadband rollout? I mean, surely we cannot roll out broadband right next to where the private sector is going. So myself and Mr. Jumat, we already had discussions with the executives of Neotel some probably about a month or so ago, putting these issues on the table. Obviously, all these issues are also impacted on the recent budget cuts that's been introduced. So we've got no choice, basically, to almost go back to the drawing board, and obviously also pulling in legal services into this process, because obviously we are on a contractual commitment with Neotel. But to what extent can we look at the contract and say, where are those areas where one can create flexibility into the process, but without obviously flouting some of the supply chain management rules that might govern this process. So we're also going to pull in the provincial treasury in it. But Chair, you can be assured we are looking at these things, and we're also looking obviously ahead. Just one issue on the safety, and I'm sure the team can come in. I mean, Dr. Fast can also add over and above the fact that we're talking only about safety in week 5. I also need to stress the point that a safety discussion takes place every week at Cabinet. So if you look at our Cabinet agenda at the moment, there is a slot for the City of Cape Town, Minister Fritz, his department, as well as the South African Police Service, to actually talk to us as to what is happening in this space. And in fact, in that meeting, we have the provincial commissioner. She's almost there every week talking about some of the safety issues, and we're working much more closer now, obviously, with the SAPs as well as the City of Cape Town to deal with the issues around safety. So if you look at the new VIP, or not, if you look at the new measurements that we've put in place, Chair, with regards to obviously the 3 priority areas, there is a massive shift in looking obviously at crime prevention initiatives. And I mean, we can supply all those indicators to you as a committee, but I mean, as I said, if you would like it now, I can also ask Dr. Fast to give us just a little bit more detail as to what are some of those indicators. But I want to say that it's on our agenda. We discuss it every week. Yasina is also pulling the team together with Keith Kluter, who's the HOD for health, and then every 5 weeks we have a dedicated discussion where we look at safety measures across the entire province, particularly focusing on the hotspots. And at that meeting, the mayors of each of these regions also get an opportunity to actually talk about what are some of the issues that is going on in their space. So I think that's it from our side.
Before Hilton responds, thank you, Dr. Malela. Sorry to interrupt those ends there. I saw the Premier had his hand up before Hilton responds. Premier?
Thank you very much, Chair. I was going to add, first of all, what DG was talking about is that the environment changes all the time, especially with tech and connectivity. And of course, when we entered into the contract to what's happening right now, I mean, if I look at the broadband rollout by the private sector in Khayelitsha and Mitchells Plain at the moment, so that says, well, where should we be focusing? And that's why we've got to have these discussions again. And then, of course, from a measurement point of view, I mean, obviously Hilton can also talk to it, but I mean, the end result is education outcomes and GDP and economic stimulation. If you ask, and Hilton can probably give you these numbers as well, if you have a look at what gets searched on the back end of the hotspots of the free Wi-Fi, you'll generally see, and I'm not sure how, I haven't had a look at it for a while, but what the jobs, people are asking for jobs. People are doing, I think number one was which was exciting for me, was education questions. So it was young people doing research for school projects. If we just did that and nothing else, well, you know that you're actually doing the right thing. I remember second was jobs, and third was health questions, specifically in some of the rural areas. And that concerned me because, Google's not a doctor, but if you live far away from healthcare facilities and you've got a free hotspot, it's much easier to ask a health question to this free space than spending the kind of money that you would have to spend to take a taxi to get to a clinic, etc. So, yeah, it's but we can get into that kind of depth and detail on what happens in each of these hotspots, because you can actually see what people are looking for, what they are asking, you can even see right down to what kind of device that they are utilizing. So obviously that data is pretty valuable data, because it really can influence the way you deliver it. It can influence the way you support it again on the back end. If everything's being asked about health from a specific area, what is the closest health facility? And maybe you actually needs to then sort of influence you. Is that where your next health facility needs to be opened? And I'm sure Hilton can probably give you better data or granular data than I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Hilton?
Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, can I link to the last question of Premier in terms of the granular data? At our last standing committee session, it was requested that we do a presentation to the committee on broadband. And I think these questions now inform that specific presentation, so that we can give you that when we do the presentation once it's set. If I can go to the broadband, you asked specifically how far with the broadband, and DG correctly said that we still have 4 years to go. But we cannot wait until the last year of the contract before we start the procurement. And Premier's also highlighted the changing technology landscape. So what we're busy doing is we've got a team comprising of .P, environment, economic development and tourism, and education, treasury, and health, because those are the key players in this space, and those are the key, education and health are our key clients when it comes to broadband. And what we've agreed on is that we'll do a few reviews and assessments. Firstly is the implementation review. We need to look at what we did right in the first one, because it was greenfields. It was something new. The technology landscape and the broadband landscape was not as developed as it is now, and that was 8 years ago when we started with this process. So we're doing an implementation review, but also an impact evaluation, which will be done by DDAT. And then a key part of it will be to look at the technology landscape, as the Premier now said. We need to look at what is the technology landscape, what is the Western Cape government's future business requirements, and what will be the services that we're going to render via these, that will require broadband and connectivity. And it might be wider than what we do at the moment, and it might be totally different. Then there'll also be, DDAT will also do an assessment of the telcos. Remember, when we started the broadband process, there weren't many telcos in the space. There's quite a few of them that have emerged over time. The Premier's mentioned those that are now doing business in the underprivileged areas and where we get cheaper fiber. And then we also need to look at the issue of the broadband financial model. So how are we going to finance it? What is going to be, we need to do some analysis of the investment that we've made. We need to look at how we're going to finance it. Is it still going to be just Western Cape government funding it fully, or what will be the model? And then lastly, we need to look at our business model. So the current business model that we have, as it is centralized, it's only one service provider. Should we outsource it to more than one service provider? But those are the evaluations that we're busy with at this stage already. So by June next year, all of these reports will start coming together, and then we'll start making decisions as to where we're going to go with the procurement of the new service. So 4 years still to go, but we are busy with quite a few reviews to inform our next procurement process. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Hilton. Member Dagmar, see your hand is up again.
Yes, Chair. No, I'm still, maybe I don't think I missed it, but I was still just waiting for the issue of whether there was a reference in the annual performance plan to the required target in regard to the internet access via our 630 hotspots, and what is the current target? I don't think there was a specific answer to that.
Okay.
Chairperson, if I may.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Chairperson. So as it relates to the target, we do not have a specific target. We're busy with rolling out all of these hotspots at the moment, and the target will be dependent on the marketing of these hotspots, uptake and usage, people spreading the word amongst one another, and then also the funds. Obviously, it's dependent on the funds that we have. So the target for the number of hotspots is 1,600. That's the ultimate target. But we do not have a target of accessing the number of people, or the number of people that will be accessing. That is a process that will be part of our change management to ensure that we increase the uptake and usage of these Wi-Fi hotspots. So if direct response, do we have a target for the number of people to access? Not at this stage, Chairperson, but as the DG has indicated, he wants to go further and want to go further than just the number of people. It's about impact. But as it relates specifically to the question on the hotspots, no specific target for people accessing, a specific target for the number of hotspots to be rolled out, but we will have a change management plan. We do have a change management plan to increase the uptake and usage.
Thank you. I see Member Brunke's hand just went up.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, also on safety, I would like to ask the department if they can explain or elaborate more on how they will be working with religious institutions going forward with regard to safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Malila?
Chair, let me respond to the issue of safety, and maybe just do it holistically. I mean, the current safety priority is based on two legs. It's violence prevention, and then there is a law enforcement leg. And obviously, the main issue is to reduce interpersonal violence, because we believe that contributes to jobs and it contributes to well-being. And what we want to do as part of our major priority under safety as part of the three is to actually implement our strategy across all the hotspots, and we called it an area-based implementation strategy, and that would be based on obviously the surveillance and the data that comes from it. So what we're going to do is to track the size and trends of the consequences of the problem, and then also track the impact of our particular interventions. What we're also doing is we're learning also from obviously international best practices, also local evidence, and we also take evidence from violence prevention initiatives and also law enforcement issues. So we've looked at documents, particularly from the World Health Institute. We've also did some background analysis, looked at the Cardiff model particularly, and locally, Chair, we've looked at what is happening as an example in Khayelitsha. Now, you may recall the Khayelitsha Police Commission, that was set up a couple of years ago, and we've used that also as one of the key inputs into our own intervention. So the big focus will be on data-led interventions using obviously a combination of the Cardiff model and our own work to actually determine what our interventions are going to be. So, Chair, in relation to that, obviously there's the whole issue around community engagement. There's work around the joint district work, and then also making sure that there's alignment between the national safety priorities and also our own priorities, together with some of the priorities that's been put together by some of the municipalities. But the key point, it needs to be based on evidence, it needs to be data-led, and it actually needs to be supported by an approach that involves all the respective communities. So in relation to the religious institution, I think in fact it's about 3 weeks ago, the Premier hosted a webinar together with Minister Meyer with all the religious institutions. In fact, there's another meeting that is planned soon with all the religious institutions, because we believe they play a major role within the community, and it's part of our entire approach around a whole of society approach in dealing with some of these particular issues. We've also dedicated an official in our department that works quite closely with these institutions, because as I've indicated, they play an important role, and particularly also as it relates to GBV. Now that we're also in the 16 days GBV sort of period, and then also the work that they're doing, particularly also in some of the rural areas. So, Chair, I can confirm it is very much high on cabinet agenda. In fact, the meeting that the Premier is having with the religious institution included some of the cabinet members, and also moving forward, it will include some of the cabinet members. So, the highest policy decision making of government, we realize the importance of the religious institutions. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to make last input before I just give some guidance going forward. My next set of questions is going to be for the corporate assurance team, so if they can just get themselves ready, and just I've got a few questions for them. But I just want to give input, and then the colleagues and members, we can ask questions once I'm done up to page 32. So you can just go through your question list up to page 32. And then I just want to give input on the broadband, and thank you for the feedback, and also the Premier gave input. And in fact, that's just the conversation that I wanted to know where that conversation is, because Vumatel, for example, is busy in Mitchell's Plain. Mitchell's Fibre is called for Mitchell's Plain. And it will really be, from my perspective, obviously, be great if government can, not them, but whoever the companies out there that are currently doing the work, and really look at the contracts that was drafted years ago to see about why would government spend, my question I'm asking myself, wait another 4 years or spend another 4 years, millions of rands, if company X, Y, or Z, regardless of who they are currently installing, in that particular case, fiber. And how does government piggyback on this? And the question I'm asking myself is, do you have to wait another 4 years or 6 months or 12 months? Because that can be a saving for government in billions of rands if you partner wherever you partner with, wherever in the province. For example, in Merville, I mean, there are kids who are using the school Wi-Fi. And does the school Wi-Fi strategy need to continue if private sector can do it? And that's the questions I'm asking myself. So it's good to know that there is a conversation taking place. And I'm mindful of the fact that there are contracts in place and there are legalities that needed to be overcome. So I don't expect people in this meeting to tell us what they're busy technically, because I'm mindful that any individual listens via YouTube can use it for the future purposes. But I'm just happy that the conversation is taking place, that we are need to look at getting best value for citizens of this province, that will be faster fiber at the cheapest cost, and not government spending another few billion over the next few years. And private sector can do it, and government can just piggyback on that. I see another hand just went up now again. Oh, that's Premier Windy. You wanted to give input before we continue?
Thank you, Chair, but I think you've just covered it. That was the question that I think the DG was talking about, about we've got to look at it a little bit differently. That's what I've asked them to look at. It's obviously there's a difference. Private sector Wi-Fi rollout is cost. Yeah. They have to get a return, but it's pointless, as DG said, it's pointless us putting a line in right next to a private sector line. Why don't we rather get a deal to say, well, you put the line in and we will buy on top of that free time for those citizens that need the free connection. And that's that new discussion. But of course, these are difficult discussions because there's already a rollout and a contract in place. But I think it's exactly as you said, and that's what we've got to look to. But I mean, these are the difficult discussions that's got to happen while the tech environment is evolving and kind of moving past a contract that we put in place years ago. And so now, how do you tweak that on the way? And obviously, this is where legalities come in, contracts, etc. But that's exactly the discussion that I think the DG said is that they are having at the moment.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I remember Dagmar, saw your hand went up now.
Yes, Chair. It's just that whenever you're ready, I have 1 or 2 questions on the strategic overview. Okay. That's like, as you said, 27 to 32. But whenever
can
you're
I just
ready,
quickly deal with my corporate assurance, then we go from there to your set of questions. I just wanted to ask something for corporate assurance, which will probably be applicable for, not probably, it will be applicable for all the departments, because I know corporate assurance got a wide role. What was the strategy with the collection of data over the last few months? It must have been extremely difficult, not being physically present, as you did in the past. And I just wanted to get an understanding. And how did you do it? Was it just via Zoom, MS Team? Because that'll be important for me to understand as I also go to other meetings. And how did you fact check the information? Because in the past, obviously, you could physically check if things were done. So I just wanted to get an understanding. How did you do it? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this going forward? Or Member Dabo, can I ask you to continue with your questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Chair, I would just like to ask, under the issue of values, I'm sure the Premier and the DG and other officials would agree that, one of the ongoing challenges we face are issues of diversity in our province. And, often, we have an incident like in Brackenfell, and that again raises the the challenge in regard to diversity, not only in schools, but in our communities. And that's why I want to ask, when we mention the values there, as they are outlined in the annual report, it seems that we don't place an emphasis on the issue of diversity as a particular value, both within the provincial administration and also in regard to the province as a whole. I think after the Brackenfell incident, and I'm not sure whether I heard the Premier correctly saying that there would be a program, but very often these issues emerge in different parts of the province, and it doesn't appear that we have a sustained intervention. I know that in the first VIP goal, we talk about building safe and cohesive communities, but I feel that this is a real gap in the province at the moment. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be assisted by actually including the issue of diversity under the values that we list in the annual report, because all of us know that we face issues of gender discrimination, racial discrimination, discrimination based on sexual preference in our province. So I would just like a response to that in the issue of values. And then the last one, we obviously have constitutional mandates, including the provincial constitution. I know, Chair, this is an issue that we've been wanting to get an update on, but I would just like to ask, for the benefit of the committee, what is the Premier's current thinking in regard to honouring the provision of the provincial constitution now that we have the Children's Commission in place, the issue of the Environmental Commission, which all of us know is actually an obligatory provision of our Western Cape Constitution. What is the current thinking of the Department of the Premier in regard to this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just, sorry, I just missed one or two questions on page 32 for corporate assurance. The Central Advisory Committee, if we can just get an idea who serves on the committee and who appoints that Central Advisory Committee on supply chain management, and what is the role of internal audit? Because it says here you advisory members, but what is the actual role? What do you advise on? Are you just monitoring that they do things correctly? If you could just give us clear guidelines. And then on that page, under it says manage VNPRA activations. I've tried to find this VNPRA definition. I cannot for the life of me find it. If you could just share with us what is that. And I think that's all the questions, members, up to page. So yeah, I have two more questions on that, page 21. I saw my notes here. On page 21, on the gift and donations, under Public Health and Social Development Bargaining Council, those two officials that went over, if we can perhaps just get a copies of the reports that was done, we'll also make it in our resolutions with CIMA. So one can just get an idea as to how reports are drafted when people go overseas, and obviously what has been shared, and how does knowledge transfer take place? Is this just in a report, and where is it documented so that other individuals who do not go overseas can have benefit of that? I think that's page 21, 22. Yeah, I've covered on all of those questions. Members, any other questions up to page 32? Nothing else. That's all the questions. Thank you, Dr. Malila, Corporate Assurance and the team.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Henriette to deal with the corporate insurance stuff. I mean, if there's anything that needs to be added, I can do that. And then Hilton, if you can maybe just respond to the VNPRA issue. And then Michael, if you just want to say something around diversity, and then I'm sure, you know, if there's anything to add, I will definitely add to that proposal by member Dagmo. So Henriette, if I can ask you to deal with the two issues of the chair. Thanks.
Thank you, DG. Chairperson, obviously for us to be able to do, and the question that you ask relating to data is applicable to internal audit and forensic specifically. They have to comply to the assertions of reliability and accuracy. So the way that we dealt with data was that they either received scanned copies from the client departments of the whatever stuff they were looking for, or they themselves moved in to go and obtain the information. So the problem period was really the hard lockdown where we couldn't get into departments, but after that we really went back to reasonably normal. So yeah, they cannot just go on Zoom. They had to get the documentation that they ask for. Chairperson, the question with regards to the CPAC, so the Central Procurement Advisory Committee is a committee that is appointed by the HOD of Provincial Treasury. So it really comprises of Treasury membership, and then they had the CFO of Health served on it, and I think the CFO of Education as well. So they had a few independent CFOs. So the committee was there to advise on the governance requirements of procurement transactions, but also budgeting, cash management, financial systems, procurement, etc. And it generally dealt with procurement transactions above 5 million rand. So internal audit's role on this committee was really a consultative capacity. So they were a member of the committee, and their input would have been around the specific transaction that was tabled and open for discussion. So so it was really on a consultative measure. Chairperson, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Henriette. Michael?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chairperson member. Yeah, with regard to the diversity issue, I think it's a very relevant question with regard to where we are within our society today, and what do we as the provincial Department of the Premier do with our employees. I think that if you have a look at the overall values of the province, and especially around the caring one, there is an acknowledgement of the fact that, you know, we need to, within that space, recognize that the diversity amongst ourselves and respect one another. So I think it is a valuable discussion, and it's something that surely we also hope to take forward within our employment equity framework, because it's not then just a issue of numbers, but it's also a question then of inclusion as well as diversity. Thank you.
Chair, then maybe just a question on page 21. I want to assure the committee that whenever people go overseas, they do complete the necessary reports, and these reports are available on a corporate perspective to whoever wants to actually get access to them. But both of these related to initiatives, obviously from the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council, you know, for our people within the HR space to actually, you know, attend these international courses. And then just Chair, I mean, Hilton can maybe give some detail, but the VNPRA is basically our virtual private network remote access. It's basically just a process of providing staff, you know, access to our corporate network, but obviously via remote. And it's really just, you know, the security around that. Thanks.
Thank you. That's just that makes sense. That put a sentence into context. There's no explanation needed. To corporate assurance, is there anything before you continue with the member Dagmo's question? Being a member of that Central Advisory Committee, is there anything that you wish us to bring to the members of this committee?
Chairperson, I don't think particularly. I think the transactions that served at that committee obviously went there because they were in high value, and generally, and probably always, the recommendations that were made by that committee was implemented by the department. So it was either on the type of procurement model that needs to be used. It was about best pricing. How do you negotiate? So no, I don't think there's anything that went after the because it happened before the procurement. Let me maybe also say that. So it was implemented subsequently.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Was there still a question outstanding for Member Dagmar? Sorry. Doesn't look like it. Member Dagmar, you answered?
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
thanks.
Okay, thank you, colleagues.
Sorry, Chair, the issue of the Environmental Commission, I don't know if someone
yes, sorry, yes, it was, yeah.
Can I answer that, Chair?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I think thus far the position hasn't changed, and the honourable member knows that position, that since the Constitution was written, the legislation changes, and I think it's specifically exacerbated now that the costs of an extra layer are just really too much versus the extra protection on legislation, and that position hasn't changed. So I presume that is, that there's going to be new government, so it will be bringing that constitutional change back to the standing committee.
We did ask for a presentation on the latest on this also in the last committee, so I hope to get to one soon.
Okay.
Okay. Can I just, on strategic communication, and I have to say, although it's under events, under reporting period, under the reporting date, I have to say the communication from the Western Cape government has been excellent, whether it was the Stop the Spread, the Stay Safe campaign, Share the Laugh, and all the campaigns that run the last few weeks during COVID-19. As somebody who's very active on social media and watch global news constantly, I can honestly say our communication has been, if not definitely in the top 5 best in the world, honestly, and well done to the team and whoever's been working on the communication strategy. Members, we're going to page 36 and 106. If we can go to page 36. If I may ask members, we've been busy for an hour and almost 30 minutes. Can we take a 7-minute break and reconvene at 9:30? 7-minute break, we reconvene at now 6 minutes. Or depending what you're using, your phone or your laptop, because I see there's a minute difference. But we reconvene at 9:30. Just a coffee break. Don't don't log off. But please trust your mute button. Make double sure your button is muted. So we'll see you at 9:30.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. We're reconvening the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Matters. Just for the record, I want to check if all the members are back and we operate on the same time. The Premier and your team, you still here?
Yep.
Mr. Dugmore?
Yes, we are.
Yes, Chair.
Mrs. Philander?
I'm here, Chairperson.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, I am. I had some technical difficulties, but thank you, Chair. I'm here.
You are here. That's excellent. We're reconvening the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Matters. Members, as indicated, we're now starting from page 36 until page 106. We are going to go from page 36, and anyone can ask questions up to page 50. Let's do those 14 pages. Starting on page 36 up to page 50. That's 14 pages in total. We will start with anyone who's got questions on page 36 up to page 50. I see Member Dugmore, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on page 39, AG's report, branch people management. On page 39, there's a specific quote there about a continuing increase in the level of people management services required from client departments, which is juxtaposed against budget cuts and a less than full staff complement. But then on page 35, when you actually look at the program, obviously the program's vacancy rate is less than, for instance, program 2, for example. Now, we heard during some of the budget votes, specifically on the second adjustment, for example, local government, that there's a serious bottleneck in appointment of staff from the Corporate Services Centre. And obviously one assumes that that is from branch people management, despite the fact that there are posts which are funded and not affected by cuts to the cost of employees. So that then raises again the issue about whether there are any resolutions or plans to actually address the bottlenecks that do exist in regard to filling posts such as in the Department of Local Government. And then just to say that, is the department convinced that the centralization of people management in the Department of the Premier by and large is still the correct strategy, or is there any thinking about possibly decentralizing this function? Obviously, we know that there's a difference in health and education, but is there any thinking as to whether decentralization of this function would actually help, or is the department going ahead on the basis that it's better to centralize this function? Thanks. I do have another one, Chair, on
Member Dugmore, before you continue, I see a hand just went up. Mr. Basson?
Thanks, Chair. This may be a process matter, Chair.
Yeah.
The page references used by Member Dugmore is not according to the book that I have in front of me. So I'm suspecting that the e-copy that is with the committee member is not the same as the hard copy that we have. Don't know if you picked it up, Chair.
I did, because I've got a physical copy with me, and I've just received a note from the coordinator. It seems there was an updated version the Treasury will just send us, but I presume it's just cosmetic and one or two pages might be different, but the content surely is the same, and 90% of the content will be the same. Is my understanding correct, Mr. Basson?
Right.
Yeah, Chair, I'm actually working from the electronic version.
Yes, so I think, colleagues, what we need to do is we need to, because I've got a hard copy here with me as well. I work for the hard copy. It's easier for me to manage the meeting that way. Perhaps then we will refer to the page numbers. Then I would appreciate if officials can just try and, because you know the annual report better than we do, obviously, because you've written it, that you know the content, so that you'll hear the content question and then answer if you, because like I said, you wrote the book, so it doesn't matter which page I refer to, you will know what I'm referring to because you wrote it. So I think let's just for now, for the flow of this meeting, members will refer to the question, to the page number on the version that they've got. Official listen to the question because they know, because each program manager will know what's in his program and respond that way. Is that fine, Mr. Basson? Does it make sense?
Yes, Chair, that should work. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dagmar. Continue.
Thank you, Chair. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Member Dagmar.
Yeah. Then in regard to what I've got down as page 41, main services and standards, there's the actual achievement in regard to the Cape Access user sessions, including disclosure of all centres due to COVID-19 from the 19th of March 2020. The report is silent, or maybe I'm missing it, on whether the user sessions mean the total number of issues or complaints provincially that these e-centres actually dealt with, and then the breakdown of the compliments/complaints per department, as these centres appear to deal with issues at a provincial level, and then the total number of issues resolved or that remain unresolved. So, one has a sense that there's that big number of Cape Access user sessions, but is there any information which actually breaks it down further, for instance, into the total number of those issues that resolved or unresolved, and then the breakdown of compliments or complaints per department? So is there anywhere where there's more detail in regard to those 682,000 Cape Access user sessions?
Thank you, Member Dagmar. Can I also just a question on that, which is my hard copy, page 40. If we can get an understanding, because it talks here about 95% presidential hotline resolution rate, what is the process on the presidential hotline issues, particularly in the Western Cape? If you can just give us, just doesn't have to be a long explanation, just so I can have an understanding. And then secondly, what is the definition of a resolution in this book? Is the matter referred to province, to municipality? In this definition, is that then resolved, or do you follow it through until the matter has actually been resolved, until the client is happy? I'm just trying to get understanding. And when we're talking about the page reference numbers here, contact ticket, 20 million contact ticket, what are we, again, what is the definition of a contact ticket? If one can just get an understanding. Is any matter that's open, is it a matter that's closed and resolved? If just that'll assist me. And when we're talking about the achievement on social medias, are we talk obviously all these millions of pages? Are we talking about unique users? Do you use somebody's? If I go for my phone or my laptop, do you use the IP address as a unique user, or do you see how many times I go onto the website with the same IP address? Thank you.
Chair, I don't know. I think you went on mute.
Sorry, that was my yes. Member, any other question up to page 50? Thank you.
No, my next one is 58, Chair.
Okay, Dr. Malila, your team, you can answer.
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. I think, Hilton, we're going to ask you to respond to all the issues around the e-contact centres. And I mean, we know exactly, Chair, where those questions emanate from. And I mean, I've also the issue on the presidential hotline. Chair, I'm going to just start on the issue around the CSC. And I think the issue, Chair, around comments been made around some of the vacancies and stuff may be as a result of what's happening in the CSC. I mean, I can assure this committee that we've got information of every post that is in the advertisement process. And obviously, any post that gets advertised has got probably 10 to 15 different steps. And what we also have from our side is we can exactly indicate when did we receive, as an example, the long list, when was it sent to a department, when did we receive it back, when did the team sit with it, and how long is the process, or how long is the vacancy in the process of being filled. From where I'm sitting, I'm not aware of any challenges around filling of vacancies. And I think, as we've said in the book, what we're getting at the moment, Chair, is an increasing demand from departments, obviously, to fill positions, and the fact that we've got a very much a constrained budget, so it makes it very difficult. But notwithstanding that, we've got a service level agreement with each and every department. I mean, Mr. Jumat meet with the respective departments, and as far as I know, we honoring all these services in relation to that agreement. And if there's a particular issue, we deal with it particularly. On the broader strategy around the centralization of the CSC, or whether the current model is still an appropriate one, I need to indicate to the committee that in our own discussions as a department, particularly in relation to the new way of work, looking at whether our processes are efficient or not. I mean, the CSC is definitely also in that package. So we've started to ask the questions. I mean, we're running the model now for the last 9 years or so. Is it still the best model to run? So the team is currently busy looking at it, and we're also obviously taking it through to the PTM. I can talk about some of the values of it, Chair. I can indicate, outside of education and health, there's consistent application, at least in relation to the policies across the 11 departments. What we also do is we obviously also support departments as it relates to the audit process, and you will hear the team indicate once again for this year, we got a clean bill of health across all our departments as it relates to the CSC matter. So from that perspective, we believe that it's quite efficient. What we're also now starting to do, we're going into the analytics now of what is actually happening in the institution. So it's not just about filling in leave forms and stuff like that. Louise, who works with Michael and Michael's team, have already come to PTM, and they've actually briefed PTM on the analytics. So they're starting to analyze what are the patterns, as an example, of people coming to work. Where have people been deployed? The next step is obviously also for the team to work towards looking at the efficiencies in each of the departments. So in our Friday discussion last week, we also again said we need to raise the bar, and particularly in Michael's space, it's around providing more analytics around what is happening to our biggest source. I mean, we're spending probably about 55% on HR, but we need to know whether the people that we're employing is effective and whether they're efficient in the way that they're doing their work. The last point, Chair, is also, remember, the CSC has also got different connections. So Louise in Michael's team deals with HR administration, but then you've got Johan also in Michael's team that actually deals with the efficiency of the institution, the capacity building, etc. And also, if you look at the stuff that we're doing at Cromeria, that's also in Michael's space, which is another leg. That is also where we're looking at the skills gap, the skills training. So they all come together in one particular spot. But I can give the assurance to Member Dugmore that we've looked at it. And I think where we find ourselves at the moment with, the kind of budget cuts that we've seen coming through the system, I really think it's going to be very difficult to now suddenly kind of take this and actually put it into each of the respective departments. Because with many of these decentralization activities, Chair, comes the need to appoint lots of people. So instead of having one person looking, as an example, at leave administration for 11 departments, each department, in all probability, would like to have a person looking at leave administration. But notwithstanding that, I mean, we're still putting the CSC in the bag and saying we also need to look at, whether the CSC is still fulfilling what they have to fulfill. And if not, where can we improve? And what is the next step of work that we can do from our side? Hilton, can you maybe just deal with all the other issues around the hotline, the tickets, the social media stuff, etc.? Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, EG. Chairperson, I'll start with Member Dugmore's questions on the user sessions in the Cape Access. So the Cape Access user sessions, that is the number of sessions that we have at a computer where people have 45 minutes to use the computer and to do whatever they need to do, accessing the internet, typing documents. So that is the user sessions. That's not necessarily complaints that we managing there. However, users can, through the internet access that they have, they can then lodge a complaint that will be registered with our provincial contact center. And that is what we're covering on the next page in terms of the contact center. And I'll come get to your question on the definitions and the questions. So the provincial hotline, let me start with the provincial hotline. The process is that this is a national program. We have a provincial, a link to the national program via the line. So we get calls via the presidential hotline. We have a dedicated person who manages those calls. Sometimes it's related to the province, sometimes it's related to local government, sometimes it's related to national government. A resolution in this case is where we then escalate that call to either local or the provincial or national government department to it's been it needs to go to, and then we give them 3 days to respond. So within that 3 days, they then have to follow up with the citizen. And if the citizen raises a question such as, I need a house, it's not about giving the person a house in 3 days, it's not possible, but it's about directing the person to the right process and saying, this is how you register for a house, and then giving us feedback and saying, we have contacted the citizen, we've explained the process, and you can close the call on that matter. So that's what a resolution is, when you actually went back and resolve the call or give a response to the person, and a new process gets kicked off after that, depending on what the requirements are. So the presidency monitors our performance on a monthly basis as it relates to the presidential outline, and we report to them. So, and that is the information that we also provide in our process. So a contact ticket specifically, a contact ticket is where an entity or person makes contact with government, with us. So either they hit our social media platform, they have a mention in the social media platform, or they give our contact center a call, or whatever process, or they go to a Hawking center. Those are the contacts where people make contact with us, and we log that onto our system and saying this is a contact that we have received from a specific individual. And as it relates to social media, it's more we have a social media presence, and the official social media presence, where we have people that's following us on our official channels, but then we also have people that engage us, and we measure that in separate ways. But we do have an idea, or we do have the stats of people that access that just comment, but then we also have people follow our social media, like our Twitter feed. Obviously, if we have a YouTube video out there, it's people accessing those YouTube videos, and we have an idea there. But also our website, we get the Google Analytics. We get the stats of everybody that hit our website and what they hit it for, and that's why we can provide the stats of the most frequently accessed information on our website. So those are all the contact tickets. It's different channels, and looking at how people access government information and services through the different channels. Chairperson, I trust that I've covered those questions on the Cape Access and the different contacts.
Thank you. Mr. Molina, you wanted to add anything?
No, Chair, I think that is Hilton dealt with all the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Dagmo. You had a question on page 58. Member Dagmo, you still with us?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yeah, sorry, the first one was actually on page 48, but that's quite a quick one. Under the branch executive governance and integration, there's a commentary there around the lack of capacity in the DG support component. They're saying that it's a serious challenge. So I just want to ask if you could have a little bit more information about that in terms of the DG support component. What exactly, who's there at the moment? and what are the risks and that are caused by the fact that there's a challenge in regard to capacity, and what are the plans to deal with that. And then on page 58 to 59, I hope it's the same for the officials. It's just an issue under performance indicators. For instance, under sub-program 1.7 strategic communications, the indicator is simply the number of monthly communication tracking reports produced. Now, I just have a concern as to whether, in fact, simply the production of a report can, be described as or put forward as a performance indicator. So I wonder if there could be some commentary on that as a performance indicator, whether simply the quantity of monthly tracking reports produced is actually a valid performance indicator. So those two issues, Chair, the one on the DG's office support capacity and on those performance indicators under strategic communication. Thanks.
Thank you. I've also got a question under my page 48, which is branch Center for EU Innovation, 2.3.4, my page 48. The Center for EU Innovation number of vacancies, which place huge strain on acting as senior managers, having to perform the daily tasks, similar to question to Member Dugmore. What is the issues and what is the plan to fix that? Similarly, under 2.3.5, legal services that Mercedes Sanders, obviously it says here there's a significant growth in demand for services. You can just give an overview, we don't need every case, obviously, just an overview. What was the demand for significant services? And then the second one would be, you say here that a review was done. What is the new structure and what does it look like? And obviously you say subject to available for, funding, but we'll deal with that later. Thank you.
Chair, let me comment, and I think you're probably going to pick that up for all the branches under the section that deals with the organizational environment. Now, if you page back, Chair, and you actually look at our organizational structure, okay, you will see that on a senior management level, we have a lot of almost our entire senior management positions are filled. Okay, so I think from a structure perspective, particularly those that need to bring the kind of strategic thinking, I've got no issue with that. And a lot of the vacancies.
So, Dr. Malila, are you referring to us to the organizational structure itself, to the organogram?
The organogram, that's on page 30 and page 31. We've already dealt with that part. So I think on an executive level, and if you look at that structure, you can see almost all our senior management positions are filled. Okay, so we're sitting with particular issues on more or less the middle management level where we've got some vacancies. The plain issue is that those vacancies are just unaffordable to fill. So my call as the accounting officer to each of the branch heads has been, look at how we can reorganize ourselves and reuse our people to do what we need to do. I mean, we've learned a lot, particularly, through the COVID exercise, and there may be things that we want to do a little bit different without bringing additional people into the system. So we've now started to use people in different spaces. So that's the call that is actually gone out. And I mean, without going into the detail, I mean, if you look at, some of our allocations moving forward, and we'll come to the committee more or less in March, filling, lots of positions in this space moving forward is going to become impossible. Okay, so we need to trade off, Chair, between filling positions and having money available for goods and services. So as the accounting officer, together with the EXCO team, we've made a decision to say, let's establish a budget committee that looks at all these positions and then make a determination on whether we need to fill a post or not. Obviously, the annual report looks back, Chair. So the environment is a little bit different at that point in time. That's why you would see in most of the branches we're highlighting the issue around staff, but it's not something that I think is a major challenge for most of the components. I'm not convinced about it, and I mean that is why we've decided internally as a department to look at it somehow differently. Within my own office, the comment that's been made is...
Dr.
Chair?
Malila, sorry, but I do apologize for interrupting you. Are you you responding to what's written here, under all the branches? And and in the organogram, I just marked, I think, my comments, I don't know why I missed it earlier on, but there's about 11 positions here. Some are in the middle management. Well, let's ignore the top. Some are vacant, 2 or 3 are vacant, and 4 or 5 are acting. And if you look at the comments here, in 2.3.4, for example, it's this put at risk service levels. It says here under another one, it's affected, then it talks. So your response does not marry to what's written here. You're saying it's not a problem, but here clearly on the report, it says it's a problem. It puts service delivery at risk, some of the words they're using here. So I'm not trying to understand what you're trying to tell us.
Yeah, Chair, what I'm saying is that at the time when we've written this report, remember this report?
Jan 2020, yeah.
Yes, it reflects back to the previous years, and I'm
Yes.
not saying that capacity is not a challenge. The point I'm trying to say here, although we do not have all these positions filled, as a management team, we've decided on having a different operating model to cover the things that we need to do. So what we've written here reflects basically on last year, and also reflects on the vacancy rate that we currently have in the department. The issue is that we do not have the money to fill these posts. That is actually the key thing. So if we don't have the money to fill the post, then we need to cut our cloth according to the size, or our suit according to the size of the cloth that we're having, and that is why we've implemented the budget committee, Chair, to deal with it. So if you look at, as an example, the Center for innovation, there are some gaps in that space. I mean, that's a space that Hilton is running, but we also believe there are opportunities within that space to actually do things a little bit different, and maybe to use the people a little bit different. So all of this that I'm saying is part of a new look at the department, an innovative way of trying to do this stuff, and also to focus on what are those core things that we need to deliver. I mean, we've even asked the department or the legal services component to actually do a mandate analysis, and we're asking the question, are these things that we're currently doing in the department of the Premier, are all of them mandated? And what are those things that we must do vis-a-vis those things that we've been doing over the last couple of years that we could do because we had the fiscal environment that actually suited it, and it was actually better to do it. So, Chair, I'm not saying that that there are not risks. I mean, I want to make that point, but the other point I want to make is that we're looking at a different way of delivering our services, and it's mainly because of the fiscal and economic environment. So, Chair, if you look as an example within the DG's office, and the point that's been made in that space, okay, of saying that the component is not optimized, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that if you look at the structural arrangement of the branch executive governance and integration, there is like no chief director that pulls together the strategy and cabinet services. I mean, the CFO at the moment is mainly looking at only the financial components, whilst I've got one director in my office. I mean, in our own discussions now, we're asking the question, do we really need a chief director to pull the stuff together, or is there a different way of still delivering some of those key functions? And if you look at the way that we've been operating, Chair, in a way, a lot of the people that currently works in all the branches, they're going the extra mile. They're doing a little bit more extra things to get the things going, and the things that we need to do to actually make sure that those things are happening. So, Chair, you will probably see when we come back to the committee, maybe at the third or the fourth quarter report, we can probably give you a little bit more insight as to what we're doing, with regards to our HR numbers. But it is something as part of the broader COE strategy that we need to look at quite differently. And I mean, Michael is also on the line here. There are 13 initiatives that we're trying to implement across government as far as it relates to improved HR management. And in fact, our call as an EXCO is to say, how can we as .P lead in that space? So that's the response here that I would want to give, I think, for all the branches. It is an area that we need to dig a little bit deep in, but the reality is that we do not have the fiscal muscle to deal with all the vacancies that we currently have within the system. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marila, Dr. Malila. Dr. Malila, if we look at the structure itself, and I'm just going to use Branch Center for Innovation as an example, we have 4 acting senior posts as of end of Jan. I don't know what has changed since then. 2 vacancies, and earlier on we talked about broadband and the Neotel contract and what we need to do going forward. I mean, that position as at end of Jan is this person responsible for broadband and the service level contract, and that contract is, I presume, a Neotel will fall under that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And that post is vacant. So how are you going to do things differently there? And then I'd also like to hear from Lance himself, because he is here, obviously, because some of the comments here, and the reason obviously why we're sitting on this, because some of the comments is, it places huge strain on this management. And I mean, this is written in the report. So what has changed from Lance, if you respond, since Jan and the 31st of Jan until where we now, 1st of December, and has things been put in place? Understand the finance part of it and the budgetary issues. I mean, we all know where we are. But what has been done, because this is the first time that I've been, since 6 years of this parliament, that I see such a comment written in an annual report, that it places huge strain on this acting management. So clearly it's a serious issue. Yeah.
Hilton, do you want to respond? Chair, you will note that, I mean, Lance is no longer with us, but
no,
maybe Hilton.
Apologies.
Yeah. So Hilton, maybe just also indicate what is it that you've put in place, particularly within the CI space. Thanks, Hilton.
Sure. Thanks, Gigi. Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, the note as it stands here relates directly to our risk management approach. Also, we need to highlight the risks that we have within our environment. So there are a few key risks relating to continuity of services, information security, and this is the key risk is our resources, and that's why we've put it there. What the DG has indicated now is that we are busy in the process of re-looking and reorganizing ourselves, and also looking at our business model, is whether the business model that we have is appropriate. So yes, it's putting the team under strain, and we understand that, but we are also managing the process at the moment. And as it's put in there, some of the members have to do the normal function and to act in other areas. But we have indicated that this is a process where we now need to look at the whole of CI. How do we structure one up? And also, how do we bring people from other components in to perform this function, that we do not have to fill the posts? Your question on whether any of the posts were filled, in the broadband specifically, the post on the service level and contract management, which is critical for us, that one has been filled subsequently. And we've appointed the person in that position. So that's why the contract management is running smoothly. And then the CD is also performing the role of the director, the role of the director, connected government buildings and schools. And we just about coping, but we're doing the work and we're getting done what we need to do. So yes, Chairperson, it's raised in the annual report, but we need to look at it from a risk management perspective, and then also the fact that we are managing this process in terms of reorganizing ourselves, re-looking at our business model, and then making sure that we supplement it where possible with external resources.
Dr. Marila, you wanted to add something first?
Chair, I think that's fine. I think Hilton has given the sign that we're trying to optimize what we have and looking at the way that we function, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, members. Any other question on this? Okay, members, we're going up to page, since I think somebody said a question on page 68.
Chair, I have a quick one on 71.
Okay, you can go, Member Allen.
Thank you so much. Chair, I hope I didn't miss it. It's part of a comment, but also a question. I'm delighted in terms of the pay project that will be streamlined in order for it not to be a separate project. But I just wanted to ascertain from the DG regarding any plans, and I'm not sure if I've missed it, for next year, the pay project, if that will ultimately unfold, and if there is ultimately agreement with each and every department. Departments will, in my understanding, will interview and see if they are able to accommodate pay project interns. But if there's any discussions taking place for next year, and if there's potentially any department that is stating that they are unable to for next year, just a quick one. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just get to my question on the page 65 while I'm here? And the comment, my 65 in the hard copy, 4.2.6. And the comment there is the program underspent by 7.1% due to staff access. And then it says certain projects and events not materializing, it happens. If you can just share with us what events, I'm sure it's somewhere in the book, but at this point, I'm not sure. If you can just share what happens. And when you have staff exits, if we just listen to what we discussed now with under Hilton's department, and we're now in the 7th of December today. Yeah, 7th of December. And this report was written at the end of Jan 2020. And if one discount to what happened 26th of March with the lockdown, when there is officials and as to quote Hilton and the words he used, I think they're barely coping or something like to that effect. And perhaps this is to the HR, Mr. Hendricks. Do you looking at temporary assistance, whether project assistance or anything to assist individuals in their department to see how they can help to have that? Because once your management team is under stress, and to use the words in the report, severe strain as at the end of Jan, then obviously it filtered down to the rest of the department. We all know fish start rotting from the top, as they say in the Cape Flats. So once your management team is under strain, it filters down. What is the plan from an HR perspective? And perhaps let's go to the soft issues. What is the stress management, if you like, counseling, if you like, been put in place to deal with those issues? Because we are human beings. And when individuals start to strain, mistakes and those things start creeping in. It's just a natural human behavior. We are not robots. So what is the plan put in place from a human resources perspective to deal with those soft issues? And if a staff member is acting in a position for a long time, and I presume the fact that the vacancy has been filled, yet somebody's still acting in those posts, what is that plan? Because it creates expectations. Certainly with me, it'll create an expectation if I'm acting for posts for 2-3 years or for a year. How do you manage that expectations from a human resources point of view? Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much for that. I mean, I'm going to ask the program managers if they would like to add, but particularly Michael, if you can maybe just add to the last part in relation to how do we deal, with the stresses currently in the system, so that you can understand, Chair, what is it that we are doing, and particularly this year, it's a result of COVID. I think those stresses have actually increased on the management team, as well as obviously also staff working underneath them. Your particular question on page 65, Chair, relates to some projects and events that's not materialized. You may remember, Chair, that we fund some strategic events, and I'm just going to mention two of them that didn't materialize. The one is obviously the Cape Argus that didn't materialize this year, and it normally happens in March. The other one was the Cape Town International Jazz Festival that didn't happen, and some of these external events that we also support. And this program only underspent by about 1.3 million. So those were the main stuff, Chair, particularly under events that did not materialize under program 2. And you can see it runs across, the many sub-programs in that particular program. Then, Chair, the question that's been raised by Member Allen, I think Member Allen is really forward-looking. The matter of the pay project, that matter is on the agenda for today's provincial top management discussion. So we haven't made a decision ourselves as yet as a vote. We had a discussion about it now as a vote on Friday, but obviously we want to have a consistent transversal discussion. So we're taking that to the provincial top management meeting today in terms of where we're going with the pay project for next year. And also, obviously, there is the issue around the matrics only getting the results, I understand, somewhere during April. Somewhere during February. Chair, then the last issue is really around how do we deal with regards to the stresses in the system. Obviously, what I've done from my side as accounting officers, I communicate to the team consistently about where we're finding ourselves. In fact, we're having ExCos meetings basically on a weekly basis. Finances and operations is standard on the agenda, and also the HR stuff. What I've also done from my side is obviously through my own DG letters, as well as letters that I write to the staff within our internal magazine called Pulse. And then there's been a couple of initiatives that Johan, that works in Michael's space, have actually run with staff. In fact, during the COVID period, Chair, we had 2 staff engagements where we dialed people in. And in fact, on the one meeting, we had close to, I think, 700-800 people that was on the call, where I, as the accounting officer, together with the ExCo, gave them feedback on where we are and what is it that we're doing, particularly from a caring perspective. And I mean, the key message here, Chair, is that we care for our staff. We also show some empathy. We need to understand where they find themselves, particularly this year, where it's been very difficult at work, and also, in a lot of our personal environments at home. So, Michael, if you can maybe just talk about 1 or 2 of those initiatives that you and Johan is driving, that deals particularly with the issue around caring and understanding where staff finds himself. Michael?
Thank you, DG. Yes, committee. I think as the DG's indicated, we're offering our employee health and wellness service through a service provider. And these are a number of different interventions. Obviously, you have it at the individual level, where a staff member can call in and has access to counseling services for them and their family members, because obviously it's not only a staff member that is affected during this time, but it's also their family members. We also offer trauma debriefing or group sessions as well as a group, and managers are call in and arrange a debriefing session for a group to assist the group, because there's a group dynamic also as you obviously interact with your team and you feel the strain coming through. There's also been training sessions which we offer, and this relates to coping skills, Chair, for employees as they, especially now as they have to reintegrate into the workplace, for example, or dealing with some of these things. So there's a number of these particular interventions that we have. Chair, on another level, our service provider also has a digital solution called Hello Doctor. In other words, where a staff member can actually call in and then has access to a medical doctor, and they can access that service going forward. Obviously, that is on a confidential basis. And then overall, we have these electronic messages and that go out generally to all staff. As the DG indicated, we've also organized a number of webinars for especially your SMS members about leadership and how to manage in the time of COVID, and what are the tools that you can have. So there's been a number of engagements also available through these webinars for SMS members. In addition, we've issued a number of guides to assist managers. We've also issued a number of guides generally to overall in terms of staff, in how to respond to the dynamics of a different workplace, and how to also cope with that particular strain. So there's a number of those interventions which are making available to staff, both as an individual level, but also as at a a team level that is being able to access through their managers. Another matter you mentioned, Chairperson, around the temporary capacity. That is always available to a particular unit. But again, unfortunately, as the DG said, this is dependent on funding availability, because our regulations do allow that, in the event that there is an increase in work, etc., that you can appoint somebody on a short term, not longer than a year, to provide certain assistance going forward. So yes, that is so. Chair, yes, we strictly manage the acting arrangements. In terms of our public service regulations, you cannot act for a period longer than 6 months. So after a period of 6 months, your acting arrangement actually comes to an end. We try not to have a situation where you have somebody that's acting for too long. In some cases, you may have a person that is acting without an allowance, but that is with it's a voluntary basis, because in other words, the person then chooses for a development purposes to be, because in many cases, the post is unfunded. Therefore, you can only have an acting allowance when the post is funded. And that is part of our problem, again, coming back to the issue of vacancy managed, because as soon as a post becomes vacant, the funding is removed from that particular post, because we have, as the DG indicated, our budget committee has to determine where is the biggest need. And if necessary, it must be available to another program, so you may not be able to access that as well. But that is managed in terms of the legitimate expectations as well, around making sure that staff members is continuously informed that, this is not your post, you are working in an acting relation. We are grateful for that, but to prevent that particular scenario from occurring. Thank you.
Chair, I think that deals with our stuff. I mean, I just want to come back to the events of. I mean, I understand. I think the Cape August did happen this year, but I mean, there are many other events, that we support that didn't take place, particularly given the COVID issue. Thanks.
Yeah, no, understood that as well. I got the principle of what you're saying. I think that's the important part. I've got a question on page 77. Under in my book, in the physical book, is my 77. If you can just give us, understand the grievances and the numbers and those data in the details are in here, but what does substantiated and undersubstantiated, or sorry, partially substantiated means? Because either somebody's pregnant or they're not pregnant. You can't be half pregnant. So I'm trying to understand, what is it? Either a case is substantiated or a case is not substantiated. And obviously a case is made, a case is not made. And then in terms of the numbers given here, what does grievances finalized means? So has the matter been dealt with and the grieved party is happy, or the guilty party is being dismissed? Because there's quite big differences in what has been disputed and what has been received and what is finalized, and there's some differences between fully substantiated or partially substantiated. If one just gets an understanding of those definitions, it will give me an understanding as to what's happening here. Member, do you have any other questions up to page 90? Dr. Malila, you guys can continue. Dr. Malila, can you hear me?
He seems to have frozen, Chair.
It looks like, I thought it was me. I presume that question, Mr. Michael Hendricks can answer the question. Oh, I see Mr. Juma's hand just went up.
No, thanks, Chair. I was going to request Mr. Hendrickson in his space to give you those responses and explanations for those definitions.
Thank you, Mr. Juma.
Chair, it seems some of us are falling out of the meeting, and it would appear that Michael has also fallen out of the meeting. Can we hold those questions in abeyance, Chair?
Yes, of course.
Until they return. Thank you.
Of course, that. Member Dagmar, your hand went up now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask, in regard to page 66 and 98, just for an update on where we
Mr.
are.
Dagmar, just sorry, you went a bit back here, but I'm going to allow it, and in fact, I'm going to continue. Members can ask up to 106. Let's just get the section done up to 106. While the other members are checking the questions, Member Dagmar, you can continue.
Yeah, thank you. Just for an update on what progress was achieved in regard to the alcohol harms reduction project during this period under review, and whether it is still seen as a priority in this current year, and what are the main objectives in terms of taking that program forward. And then page 98, the province has historically had a relationship with higher education, and there's reference there made that in fact there was an evaluation of the partnership done between the provincial government and the Consortium for Higher Education. So can we just get a sense of what were the key issues that came out of that evaluation, and whether we could actually get a copy of that evaluation report of that relationship? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Juma, do you want to give some direction while we wait for the HOD and Mr. Michaels to get in? Who's going to answer those questions?
I'm back, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Hendricks, did you get the questions that were asked earlier on?
I got the one, Chair, with regard to the grievance. Is that the only one? That was the last one I heard.
Yes, just with regards to what is substantiated and unsubstantiated means, and what is the definition of a closed case and a case that's still open, etc. If you can just give us some guidance on that, and then I think Mr. Jumat will give guidance on Mr. Dagmar's questions. Thank you.
A case is finalized when the matter is finalized when is in its favor or not. So the matter is finalized, and it's basically closed. When it comes to substantiated or unsubstantiated, firstly, one is where the claim of the grievant is found to be unsubstantiated. In other words, they couldn't make out a case, and therefore the matter is also then finalized. In other cases, it may be substantiated, partially substantiated. It deals with the, in many cases, the remedy that the person wanted. For example, the person says, this is my grievance, and I want you to do the following things. So what may happen is that we may say that, yes, you know what, in that particular case, you may be aggrieved, but your remedy cannot be granted. Okay, so that is where the difference comes with partially substantiated, because you've managed the one part, but for example, the person says, now I want, say they had a grievance around a pillar leave, you know, the extended incapacity leave, and we said, sorry, your thing was denied, and then they say, but here is the medical certificate, so now you must give me I need extra annual leave or whatever, and we say, sorry, we can't give you that. What we can do is we can still give you your special leave in terms of pillar. So it's that sort of a technical difference between the two, Chair, and when it's partially substantiated and where it's not. I hope that deals with that, Chairperson.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Juma, who's going to take Mr. Dagmar's questions?
Chair, the DG is back in the meeting, but I'm not sure if he's picked up those questions.
No. Chair, I've not picked up the question. So Andre, proceed. We had some connectivity issues. I think both myself and Mr. Hendricks, and actually the entire team that sits in the side of the building, but we're back in. So Andre, if you can maybe respond to it, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Chair. DG, the member Dagmar asked a question related to the alcohol harms reduction strategy, and asked for progress in that regard. Also, whether it is still a priority and how it's to be taken forward. So, DG, with your permission, I think I'll ask between Marsha and Dr. Fast, Scorston. And also, there was a question from Member Dagmar on the evaluation that was conducted with our relationship with Czech, what were the key issues that came out, and also requested for a copy of that evaluation report. And that would be directly to Ms. Corsten. So if that's okay, we could ask between Dr. Fast and Ms. Corsten if they could respond to those questions, DG. That's fine.
Correct. Agree. Hildegard?
Yeah, I think I'll ask Marcia to come in first, and I'll just fill in anything. I think she's got the greater institutional memory of this. Thanks.
Marcia?
Hi, good morning again. With regards to the Czech evaluation that was actually conducted in 2018 and considered by the Czech Joint Task Team in the 2019 and 2020 financial year, basically to look at how to address some of the key recommendations. I think the gist of the report, Member Dagmore, is that the value of the Czech relationship with the WCG was affirmed, and some of the key elements that were pinpointed to take up in terms of improvement going forward was with regards to the visibility of Czech as an institution and its work. Then there was also the matter of the research grant. So while it was found to be useful, it was to look at how we can increase the impact and the dissemination of the research. So the Czech Joint Task Team, currently chaired by Dr. Fast in the current time, is looking at how to strengthen the Czech research partnership with the WCG and the institutions of higher learning to basically see how we can leverage much more of the relationship other than just the funding of the research calls and the research that's undertaken. So to looking at how to strengthen the partnership in other areas, basically to give effect to some collective priorities. Dr. Foss, I don't know if you want to add to that, and then I will, on the alcohol harms reduction strategy, I know that that has also been dealt with as part of the VIP1 and the safety plan implementation. So I'm going to ask Dr. Foss if she could just touch base on the progress with that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Marcia. So just to add a little bit more on the Czech, you know, we've been investing about 500,000 Rand for research calls, and the research calls are about 75,000 Rand each. Now, I come from the research area, and 75,000 is you know, it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't make much, and for all the paperwork that it produces, it's just not worth it. So we've really thought very, very carefully about this. And we right now are working closely with Czech to rather go on one research call for a much larger amount of money. But the requirement is going to be that all the universities it has to be a consortium that comprises all the universities, all the 4 higher education institutions, so that they collaborate together in a bigger way. So definitely it's very well underway. So we are taking the results of the evaluation further and are already starting to pivot and work in quite a different way. And I think we're going to see that in the new financial year in particular. With respect to the alcohol harms reduction, there's a fair amount of work that's been going on in this area. The one is that the law enforcement officers that have been appointed by the City of Cape Town through the funding provided by the province has been focusing particularly on shutting down illegal establishments, and they've particularly been doing this and working with SAPs in a couple of areas to ramp that up. There are, however, some fundamental difficulties with trying to implement alcohol harms reduction strategies. So one of the biggest challenges that we currently have is that if you you run a tavern illegally, you've got you know, thousands of liters of alcohol. The police come and raid you. The alcohol is taken to a hangar at the airport, and then the person who had the alcohol confiscated goes to the magistrate, pays about a 200-300 Rand admission of guilt fine, and then they are allowed to go back and pick up all of their alcohol. And that's a very tricky legal issue. So we want to focus on that particular issue in order to make sure that we can confiscate the liquor permanently, and it will then become a deterrent. Right now it's not a deterrent, it's just a little bit of a hassle. Oh my goodness, I have to go and go to the magistrate. So there are a range of alcohol harms reduction amendments to the legislation that we are currently considering. One of them would, for example, look more strictly at the requirement for tavern owners to ask everyone to show their ID and show that, anyone who seems to be young, show their ID and have proof. So that afterwards they can't say, oh, I didn't know, because that's a key thing, is that you can always say, well, I wasn't aware of the fact and I wasn't required to ask for proof. So there's a number of amendments that are going through at the moment. But at the same time, there are also other initiatives underway. So the one really concerning thing in the area of taverns and shebeens is that a lot of it is actually, people might think that shebeens are quite happy to operate illegally, but actually there's huge advantages to them being able to give give all the information and to get a license. The problem is the city cannot give a license. They can't give a license because there's a zoning issue, that the old zoning schemes do not allow for shebeens to be properly licensed. And they say, we want to have a rezoning. We want you to show that you're zoned for it. And they can't. So very few shebeen owners are able to actually legalize. So that is a whole area of work, and the Drakensberg municipality is currently looking at a very innovative way to get around this, where they're looking at economic overlay zones. But this is a problem that has bedeviled us for many, many years, is that actually shebeens want to be legalized. There are huge benefits for them to be legalized. They will buy their alcohol much cheaper, because right now they're having to buy it through middlemen. So that's just a range of some of the alcohol harms reduction strategies that we're currently looking at. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair, obviously, a lot of this sits within the Department of Community Safety. So I'm sure when you engage with them, they can give you all the detail of exactly where they are with the strategy. But the key point is, from where we're sitting, it fits into VIP1 and the whole issue around the safety plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Dagmar, you covered?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just got a question on page 103, right at the bottom there, on the rollover for the requested. Just assist me to understand that better, the reasons for unspent by the department. If we can just get perhaps a more clearer explanation, because that is not clear to me. And then somebody, because just below that, reasons for the deviation on that performance, it says not applicable. But then we have measures taken to improve the performance. So if you can just explain that to me also, because there's the reasons for deviation from the performance was not applicable, but then we have measures to improve the performance. Thank you. Members, any other question up to page 106? Let's finish the section. Thank you, Dr. Malila, you can conclude.
Thank you, Chair. Driekus, if you can maybe respond to the issue, it relates to the 1.6 million rollover request for ECM.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, DG. That is the ECM, or Electronic Content Management. And one of the reasons for underspending as a department in that year is also noted as ECM. So what happened was we had to sort out the funding allocations by our partner or sister departments. And that came too late for us to conclude the business on that specific service. The tender was then published and closed late in the financial year. And what has then subsequently happened is we had to apply for rollover on that project. Just on the reasons for deviations on performance and measures taken, those are not necessarily to be combined. You can have no issue really on the performance, but also take measures to improve performance going forward. So thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if I've answered you, Chair. Thank you.
Actually, no, Mr. Driekus, you did not. I still don't understand why has this happened. Because you're giving reasons to improve performance, or something went wrong, obviously. So I'm just trying to understand what happened.
Yeah, the ECM project, or Electronic Content Management, is a DCAS project. So DCAS runs with it transversely in the province. as a project. So it's about electronic content management, and CEI, or TAPS Chief Directorate, they do the management and support services from an ICT perspective on that project. But obviously, we can only procure once we receive funds from DCAS. So we have to commit the funds once we have the commitment from that department. And there was delays in that, and that led to underspending. Because obviously we couldn't go to market unless we had those commitments. So the performance is really only delayed. It's not non-performance. It was simply that we could not get those done. And that led to the underspend and hence the rollover. Chair, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rickert. So what was the reasons for the funds being delayed? I mean, with your colleagues, obviously you guys have weekly or monthly meetings with them, and let's assume no one saw this coming. What was the reasons for this not happening? That's what I'm just trying to understand, and it's not coming through.
Yeah, Chair, Hilton Arendse would be better placed on that, Chair.
Hilton.
Chair, good day. Once again, Chair, as Dricus has indicated, the rollout of ECM is a DCAS mandate. They had challenges with procuring the licensing, and we provide the support, the maintenance and support, and we can only do that once DCAS had acquired the licenses for those services and the allocation per department. And there was a delay on that part in procuring the licenses via CETA because CETA has caused a delay. So they couldn't procure the license, and as a consequence, we couldn't determine what is the level of support that we're going to have to provide to the departments. And that was challenging. It's not DCAS's fault either, and we've had engagements with CETA also, but the challenge was that they could not land the packages for the different departments timelessly, and as a consequence, we couldn't procure our maintenance requirements.
Okay, we're going to go to page 100 in part D, page 128. Members will do 128. Let's do 10 pages up to 138. (128) up to 138. (138) up to 148. Can I just ask on 139, Mr. Hendricks, when the staff do exit interviews, because obviously I can see that some of my notes here says insufficient progression. What does it mean? Is it just there's no opportunities for them, or was there no vacancies? Was there people already in those positions and they're unlikely? Was there clear during the exit interviews, could you clearly see that, hey, there's no ways Ricardo can move up because Peter's going to be here for another 20 years, so that justifies his reason? Is that what we're talking about? And then when you go into detail in the exit interviews, where it says other occupation, are those individuals leaving for the private sector? And then no reason provided. Is there space on the exit interview form where it says don't need to give a reason, or do people just write on there no reason provided? And is the exit interview form, is it part of their forms where they have to complete their pension fund, or is it something that is non-compulsory? Can an individual just do it as they leave the office, or does it get done in the last 30 days of employment? And is it a physical interview, or is it just an exit interview form? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, it is a form that we receive. Obviously, the manager or supervisor will have a discussion with the staff member who is leaving. But in terms of the information that we receive, Chairperson, from the unit, it will be recorded on this particular form. Chair, you're right. Staff are not obliged to complete it. They are not obliged to give us the reason why as well. And obviously, it is concerning when staff member doesn't want to give us a reason. And you can either want to draw a negative conclusion, or you can simply say, look here, the guy just says, look here, I want to leave. I don't want to sort of get into anything now. So it is unfortunate, Chair, but that staff choose that option, because it is their right to do so. Insufficient progression, yes, Chair, it is so that a staff member, this will typically happen where you have a number of officials on the same level and there's only one or two posts up, on top of you. So look here, I'm going to be competing with 5 or 6 people to go ahead. And in other cases, it is in fact also the person actually gets an opportunity somewhere else, and they say, you know what, this is where I want to go to. You must also remember, Chair, in some cases, people start the work, and given where they are, they say, listen, let me take this work, because it may not be where I want to be, but this is, it's a start somewhere. And as people progress, as people study further or develop further, they realize that, listen, maybe I actually am interested in another area. So they move for that particular purpose. So there's not necessarily a negative concept connotation to that. It's just somebody says, look here, that is where I actually want to be at, and this is not where I'm not going to get, I'm not going to see my progression here is going to be limited in that space.
Thank you, members. Any other questions up to page 168?
Chair.
Member Dagmar.
Chair, it's just we raise this question on a regular basis concerning employment equity, because this department needs to provide guidance to all the other departments that it works with. And we've noted, and I'll just give one example, issues of representativity in the Department of Education, which over the last 3 to 4 years has really seen diversity taking a blow, in the sense that I think out of all the senior managers, there's about 2 from the group designated African Black. Now, I just want to ask, and that's why I raised the issue right at the beginning in regard to what extent a value is attached to diversity, because this department in a critical process needs to give leadership, but we are noting, and I'm using education as one example, where issues of equity have really been reversed, and that goes along with issues of redress in trying to make sure that the departments are more reflective of the people of this province. So I would just like to ask, I mean, does the Department of the Premier take seriously the Commission of Employment Equity recommendations that are made? Do they actually look at those? Do they, develop plans arising out of the recommendations of the Employment Equity Commission? Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just ask my final questions that I've also got? And I'm going to start something that slipped my mind earlier on. The e-centers or the access centers that are being opened up across the province, and let's look at the year under review. Those employees, are they all permanent employees and under contract? And then second question regarding that, the physical, let's call it the beautification, if you like, of these access centers, and I think that's what I remember when I look at this report yesterday afternoon. Who does that? Is it a subcontractor under the Department of the Premier, or is it Department of Public Works? And then my question on the report, because something that you guys mentioned earlier on was the disabled access to these e-centers. Who checks that and who ensures that it is disability friendly? That's a third question on that. And then on the report, I we all know what Nexus has done, but on page 165, Oricon and Ernst & Young, I see Ernst & Young Digital Forensic Services for 12 months, that's 500,000. And then Oricon also done some appointment to do a risk assessment audit. If you could just tell us what exactly were they doing. And then my last question, which should probably be for some days for the year under review and it will be applicable going forward. What is the definition that the Western Cape government is going to attach to leave, particularly sick leave? Because if we know, if somebody, for example, say, listen, I've been exposed to somebody due to COVID-19 reasons, and the individuals are not in a position, for example, to work from home, let's assume is somebody that does physical work at the office, somebody that needs to be at the office, and they're now at home for 10 days or for 9 days due to exposure, and then 2 months later, the family, a husband or relative, again, got exposure for 6, and they need to be at home for another 6-7 days. What is the strategy going forward in dealing with, call it sick leaves, for those individuals who do not have access to MS Teams or Zoom? And how will that be classified? Will that fall under Zoom? Is there something the Bargaining Council will do, or something that's going to be specific to Western Cape government? I presume it's going to be the same problem, private and government sector going forward. But what is the plan if or should something? Well, I presume it probably did happen already. But how will that be classified? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, we've done a lot of write-ups on the whole issue around sick leave, particularly as it relates to COVID. I mean, Michael can explain the issue around, obviously, the policies around leave, sick leave, special leave, and particularly how it relates to COVID. So I'm going to ask Michael, maybe in that order. Let's start with that. And then Henriette can give a quick response on the two matters around the work that Ernst & Young and Oricon did. It's on program 5. And then Hilton, Chair, can actually talk about the access centers. In fact, that falls under him. And I mean, I've also attended or visited 1 or 2 of these access centers. And obviously, we need to make sure that those things are also in a good state, although there are many partners that play in this space. So Hilton, if you can just share with the committee who are the various partners and what is the role of .P, particularly as it relates to those things, and also the staff. Thanks. So it's first Michael, and then Henriette, and then Hilton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Chairperson, members, we the only provincial government that actually has a special leave policy. In terms of the national collective bargaining agreement, there's a number of different types of leave, as you know, sick leave, annual leave, etc., etc. And then it has a provision that says departments can have special leave policies as long as that doesn't mirror what you already have in the collective agreement. In other words, you can't give more annual leave than what the annual leave numbers have been agreed to or less. So when it comes to, Chair, in terms of your issue, sick leave is when the individual is sick. In other words, there's a medical certificate, the person is sick, he's not well, and that person will be. So if somebody that actually then unfortunately has COVID, that person will then have is on sick leave, okay? And if that person's sick leave isn't used up because of the condition they have, then they can apply for what we call, I referred earlier on to the incapacity leave. That's additional sick leave that you can have, because the whole reason why you have sick leave is to deal with those particular cases. So that is when the employer is sick. The special leave happens when there is a employer-initiated leave. In other words, the employer says, Michael, don't come to work, okay? It's not you as the employer saying, I'm not coming. If you as an employee are saying, listen here, I'm scared, I don't want to come to work, that is going to be your annual leave. But if we as the employer, based on, for example, the lockdown rules, the lockdown rule says, look, X, and so you can't come to work, whatever, the numbers must be so many people, rotate, etc. Then that is employer initiated, then it is special leave, then it does not come off the leave allocation of the employee. It is then special leave because it is employer initiated. Now, DPSA has been promising for some time to have a policy framework with regard to this matter. At one stage, because nobody else has a special leave policy, they were toying around with the idea, and I say toying around because please don't quote me, but one of the things they wanted to say was that for people who are told to stay home, because obviously they can't work from home, you will still be deemed to be on duty. It's just that you're not coming into the work, but you are still deemed, because what it means is that because you are deemed to be on duty, the employer can still say, Michael, I want you now. You can't come to your office, but I need you to go and help out at a school, for example. Okay, because you're still on duty, or you can help out at the cop shop or whatever. But that is what they've been toying around, Chairperson. We're still waiting for clarity with regard to that, but to deal with this very particular matter, because we know there are employees who, by the nature of their work, they just cannot work from home. So yes, thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, the responses on EY and Oricon or Ernst & Young. So firstly, Ernst & Young was contracted to do or to render our digital forensic services. Now that is a very specialized service which includes the imaging of electronic devices, mobile devices, computers, laptops, actually also data recovery and reconstruction that is used during forensic investigations. So we do not have this expertise in-house, and we also do not plan in the short term to appoint that. Firstly, these expertise are quite expensive, and then as the DG has indicated in terms of our budget constraints. The second one that you have questioned is Oricon. So Oricon was appointed to do an internal audit assignment, which is an assurance on the risk management process in the province. This particular engagement is required every 3 years, I think. And because the risk management function also resides under myself, we outsource this so that there is an independent view on the risk management process.
Thanks, Henriette. Hilton?
Thanks, DG. Chairperson, the Library Business Corners is essentially a rural development program. And the Department of the Premier provides a strategic oversight and direction of the program. The operational management is being done by Library Business Corners, which is an NPO. But then we also partner with the municipalities who provide us with the facility and also sometimes security in the building and the maintenance of the building. And then with UWC, we have a partnership where they train any new employee within the within the Cape Access program. They get trained at UWC in terms of how to manage the center. They have a specific program there. And then we have ICDL, the International Certificate in Digital Literacy, that organization who provides us with the training material. Now, as it relates to the employees, the Cape Access employment has never been seen as a permanent employment. It's more a gateway and an opportunity for our citizens in the rural area to gain experience in managing a center and a facility, and then leave from there and get better opportunities. And we've lost many of our employees over time. And to us, when we lose an employee in the Cape Access program, it's a gain, it's a win, because we only put people that's unemployed in the center and then go through a formal training program. They get mentored, and then they leave. Chairperson, we were at Langsburg last year, and I think the standing committee was there last year, and I was quite impressed with the gentleman and the people out working in Langsburg and the work that they're doing on the farms. But when I got there this year, September, a year later, both of those employees were gone because they got opportunities elsewhere and they move on. And that's why we have the Cape Access program. So you are put on a maximum period of a 3-year contract, but the idea is to come in, gain experience, and then move on. As it relates to the refresh, Chairperson, the refresh depends on whether it's structural, then the municipality will do the structural repairs, as in the case of Prince Albert recently, where they had leaking in the roof in the municipal building, and the municipality fix that. Or when it's internal in terms of the computers, LBC will then deal with the computers over there. What we are doing is we are now looking at a refresh program for all the older centers and just bringing it up to a more modern standard. But we are working with, Library Business Corners has put things in a process in place to now look at the refresh. Obviously, the funding also plays a role in terms of how many centers we can refresh. key thing though, when we do refresh of a center, they try to use local contractors as much as possible. So we do not take contractors from Cape Town and go through to say Greyton to refresh that center. It needs to be somebody in the Genade, that Greyton area that does the refresh and that does the carpentry or the painting or the carpeting, whatever they need to do. Even the employees that we appoint in those areas. So we going to have a center in Dooley and then get a person from Wolseley to be appointed there. That, because there's so few opportunities within a space like in Dooley, in Sirius, and now if there's 2 job opportunities, doesn't matter what the salary is or what the monthly payment is, you cannot go and appoint people from outside because people in Dooley obviously are looking forward to at least creating 2 months for those 2 jobs that's in that community. So we try to do everything as local as possible when we do appoint people or we do the contracting of service providers in that space. Chairperson, the issue of disability, that's part of the design, that's intrinsically part of the design of our e-centers. You'll notice the concourse that we have, the center that we have in the concourse, and that's the only metro center, the one downstairs. You'll see even in that concourse, we have a disability just right at the end. So when you pass the contact center at the bottom, the e-center is at the top level, but at the bottom in the one corner, we do have a disabled desk. So we try to focus as much as possible on disabled, not only physically disabled in terms of wheelchair bound, but also the software for people that's visually impaired, and then also for the hearing impaired. So we try to cater for all type of disabilities. Not all centers are equally poor because of the clientele, and in some cases I do not know whether they still have it. I just need to check. But I know that in Genade, Greyton, they had a specific session on a weekly basis for the disabled in that community to come to the center where they assist them with the ICTs. And there's 1 or 2 good stories that came out of them. Lastly, Chairperson, our employees that we have in the centers, they get well skilled. Some of them within library business corners, in the way that they're structured, they then, those people that's technically astute and well skilled, they even elevate those people into the level of technical coordinators. So they will then do the help desk support and the tech support for a cluster of centers. And those people are well skilled in training. They are being elevated to master trainers, and they then train any newcomers, any new staff that's being employed in the system. They train it. Whereas previously we had to pay ICDL to providers with expert trainers. They now have their own set of master trainers who go around and train the people. So it's more a developmental program, and they try to elevate and get as much as possible opportunities for the people in the rural areas. I hope I've responded to your questions adequately, Chairperson.
Thanks, Hilton.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Hilton. Was there still questions outstanding?
No,
I
Chair.
think there was one with regard to the employment equity.
Yes, that's Michael.
Can I?
Yes.
Can I go? Okay. Thanks very much. Yes, Member Dagbo, it is so that it is important that we need to ensure that not only for the sake of compliance per se, but we have a situation of employment equity within the province, and especially within the provincial government, given the fact that the size of us as an employer. I think it also beholden on us as an employer to also set that particular example. In terms of where we are, Chairperson, when it comes to recruitment, we have a recruitment policy that specifically requires when we are recruiting, when you're going through a shortlisting process, to ensure that you have you take into account employment equity even at the shortlisting stage, because too often what happens, you exclude employment equity people from the shortlisting, and then thereafter you want to say, oh no, but you see, we only had so many people to choose from. So we actually want the delegated authority. And again, just to remind members again that as the CSC, we don't actually do the appointments. At the end of the day, the appointment is done by the HOD or his or her delegated person, whether the program manager, director, etc. So the responsibility remains on them. What our job is to do is to ensure that during that interview process, we remind the panel of what are their responsibilities with regard to employment equity, that you also don't take into a situation where employment equity is sort of something that you do by the way, but it's part of that final determination when you want to appoint somebody, whether or not this person is will ensure that employment equity is furthered or not. Typically, what should happen, Chair, is that once the scores are all in and you've had a discussion and everybody's there, if there's a person that will further employment equity in terms of your target, you should be taking that person unless you can actually have a reason why not. In other words, you want to turn it around. And that is why also the employment equity officer of a department has to sign off and be satisfied that the reasons given for not taking somebody from a designated group has been set out by the panel, and at the end of the day, the person making the appointment isn't satisfied with that particular explanation going forward. The other part of Chair is that is to approach employment equity not only from as it's shown here from a numerical issue, but more from a qualitative and a more culture issue, because it's about diversity and inclusion at the end of the day. And employment equity is much more than just race and gender. It covers a whole range when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and that's what we're trying to do going forward. We have, as I indicated early on, finalized a draft EE framework that talks specifically as a section on the whole matter of diversity and inclusion, and how do we deal with those particular matters as well when we want to have this particular situation. And yes, we do take into account what the employment the commission says, because the commission in fact has a general a provincial snapshot, not only of a provincial government, but they take provincial snapshots what's happening also across in a particular province. So we do take that into, and we do also then make sure that departments are reminded by that, because every department has an EE forum, and they all submit their particular reports, and each HOD in fact signs off on that EE report back to the Department of Labour. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. I just have a question on one of the answers that was given earlier on. Was Robson gave an answer on Aerocon or Oricon, and the other company that was doing, I think it was Ernst & Young, I think, was doing the digital forensic services one, which he said the government or the department didn't have a services. Why was the service needed?
Chairperson, the service is required to, during investigations, do imaging of computers and analyze the data available on the computers to see whether, or not only computers, any digital device for that matter, to see if there's any evidence on the computer that can actually link to the matter that they're busy investigating. As an example, has the person created an invoice on his work laptop that relates to a private company that is being investigated, just as an example.
Yeah, that makes sense. So something triggered that. Obviously, what triggered the need for the service?
Certainly, Chair. So we know that on average we do this for most of the forensic investigations. So we procure that in any case, but you only utilize it if the specific investigation that they're busy with has a link to digital evidence.
Chair, maybe just also to note that obviously our unit in forensics is doing the services for all the departments across the entire Western Cape government space. And I mean, I think as Henrietta said, I mean, this service becomes important because nowadays everything, or most things that we're doing it via our computers. And this basically just assists us in obviously collating some of the evidence and concluding the investigations.
Thank you. So the service, is it a set contract, or because it's 500,000, I see, so we're paying them as just if we not use them, or we're paying them when we use the services? I'm just trying to understand, was it a specific investigation that required the service and we decided to sign a full contract, or was it just a normal contract are they on contract for when we're going to need them? I'm still trying to understand that part of things.
Chairperson, you're right. It is so the contract is for the maximum of 500,000, but we only pay them when we use them. So there's they have quoted a price per device, and depending on how many devices we send to them to analyze, that is what they get paid.
Okay, I've just got some questions on page 160. Table my big book, sorry, my physical book, page table 13.3.12.13, and I'm going to go down to up to 3.12.17. The suspension without pay. And for following questions, we obviously don't have to go into the names of the individuals, but we just want to get the principles of what happened. The suspension without salary, what triggered such a suspension and what was involved? And then the final written warning and written warning, is this related to the same case? And the dismissal, was it also the same case or a completely different matter? And then 3.12.13, can you give us details? What was the instruction, carry out for the instruction, and at which level did it happen? And then the second line, it steals, bribery, or commits fraud. Sorry, between steals and bribery, there's no comma, so I'm just trying to read that properly. If you could just tell me, is it two different crimes? And then the grievances you can leave, we'll ask for the report on that. Yeah, in fact, that's covered. Members, any other questions up to page 164? Because we're going to conclude.
Michael?
No other questions? Yeah, you can continue, Dr. Malila, and I presume...
Michael, do you maybe want to respond to some of the issues raised?
Okay, thank you. With regard to the suspension, Chairperson, that was a 3-month suspension without pay, and it related to a deputy, a salary level 11 person that was found guilty for failing to carry out an order or instruction by their supervisor. That was the one. And then the steals, bribes, or commits, it's one sort of category of offense, Chairperson. That was one person that was at a level 9, and that person was then dismissed after being found guilty in regard to that, Chair. Thank you. I don't know if I missed something, Chair. Is there something else that I missed?
Sorry, I was cut off there for some reason. I don't know why. But do apologize. But if you don't mind just repeating that, please. Sorry.
Okay. So, Chair, with regard to the suspension, the salary suspension, that was a sanction that was imposed on an individual. The sanction was 3 months suspension without pay, and it was for for failing to carry out a order or instruction. The person was at a salary level 11, and then the other area you asked for, Chair, was the steals, bribes, or commits fraud. That is a category, Chair. It was one sort of offense or one circumstance. That was a level 9 individual, and after a hearing, he was dismissed, Chairperson.
Okay, so the person that committed fraud was the same person that was dismissed under 3.12.13. Okay, thank you. And then I see under 3.12.3, sorry to now have a dialogue, the fails to carry out order instruction, there were 2 individuals.
Yeah, there were 2 people. So in the one case, the person the person that failed to carry out the order instruction, that person received a suspension. In the other case, the person received the final written warning. It was a different, completely different circumstances and a different individuals, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, that covers all the questions up to page 164. Thank you, Dr. Malila, Mr. Hendricks, Mr. Basson, Marsha, Fazia, Hilton, Henrietta, everybody here today, Hilton, Hildegras, Dr. Fast, Mr. Jumat. If I miss you, I apologize. But thank you for everyone, and the Premier, obviously, that came to answer questions in front of this committee. I have to ask formally, is there any member from the public here today that want to ask any questions or make some input? Seems to be no member from the public. HOD and Premier, do you want to make some final comments before we excuse you?
Chair, can I go first and the Premier
Yes, please.
conclude?
Yeah,
If you're
go
okay
ahead,
with that?
Dr. Malina.
Chair, from my side, I just want to say thank you to you as the chair, as well as the committee members, I think, for dealing with this process, particularly in such a professional manner. And then I want to say also thank you to the Premier, I mean, as the executive responsible for the Department of the Premier, also I think for his leadership, but particularly also just to keep us on our toes all the time. And then more importantly, Chair, I want to say thank you to the ExCo team and to the entire management team of the Department of the Premier. I mean, if you work through the annual report, it gives you an opportunity to reflect on the amount of work that has happened. And, you know, the work happens through people and people make sacrifices. And I mean, as the AO, I mean, I can present this report, you know, with pride. And I really want to say thank you to the management team for the extra effort that they've put in to make this a success. We've committed to the Premier that we'll step up. And I mean, we will make the bar even higher. And ultimately, it's about service delivery. And I can make that same commitment to you, Chair, and also to the committee, because I mean, we take our work very serious because ultimately it's about service delivery. But once again, from our side, thank you to you and your committee, and particularly also to our team and to the Premier and the rest of the colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Malila. Premier?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I mean, first of all, can I say to you and the committee, thank you very much for this engagement. To all of those officials joined us today, thank you very much for giving us all the answers. But then also perhaps just to join on to what the DG has just said, you know, I mean, and of course, we're dealing with an annual performance and a plan that's tabled, a report that's tabled, where we're actually looking back. But right now, it's quite amazing to be in a position that we are. And I really want to thank the DG and the full team for, especially in this last while, stepping up. I mean, it can be 11 o'clock at night, weekends, you name it. And it just amazes me, the dedication to making a difference in our province. So I want to, in front of the Standing Committee, say to the DG and the full team, thank you so much for what you are doing. The commitment is seen, and you know, it's tough, Chair, in these times when you know, for years people are not getting the, you know, they get the financial recognition. We don't have those opportunities anymore, and there's like even more commitment than before. People just step up, and for that I'm really grateful. And I want to say to the DG and the full team, thank you very much, because you know, that is what makes a difference at the end of the day. Despite tough times, it really does. It does show, and it makes the difference. And it's for the citizens at the end of the day. That's why we do what we do. But with that, can I also say, Chair, to you and the committee, thank you very much, obviously, for also, you know, pointing out areas where you think we are not, you know, performing or monitoring us. That's how democracy works. And can I thank you and each of the members of this committee for the part that you play in making sure that we continually strive for improvement to make things better. I mean, that's our job. And especially this department, you know, we are all encompassing. We have got direct delivery, but we're actually trying to hold the whole government together, our interaction with the presidency. I mean, if I just think about this weekend, and I mean, I think even on Friday night, I think the last email I got from the DG on Friday night was just before midnight, because we were frantically getting our report to the presidency in. We committed to get it in by Friday. And I mean, it was a comprehensive report into what we're doing now. And that just shows you the kind of commitment that this team really does put in. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. But Chair, thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Premier, and we wish you and the team, the DG, and everybody as you go on. I presume can't call it leave these days, but as it becomes during the festive season, I know it's going to be tough given the resurgence of COVID-19. So yeah, the message, as you guys always said, wear a mask, stay safe, adhere to safety regulations. And again, thank you for the work you guys have done, not only for the under review, but as we go forward during the period of COVID-19. And Simas the Grootboom is not here, but if he's gone completely, I wish him well in his retirement. And obviously, I presume you're going to appoint somebody soon. And I think that the area that does seem that required a little bit of attention would be Hilton's team. So hopefully you can find the money to provide them some form of assistance. And we're looking forward to see what the broadband solutions are going to brought up for next year. And then they should really go to potentially look into your contract with the service provider there. But other than that, we are happy with the progress you guys made, and we can just say thank you and wish you well for the rest of the festive season. And Merry Christmas to you celebrating, or happy days, happy holidays, whatever you believe in. Enjoy, spend some time with the family, do take some rest, because I can only imagine, knowing South Africans, the second week of January, we're going to be COVID crazy. So thank you for coming. You are now excused.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, we're going to stay behind just to conclude the business of the committee. Wasima?
Yes, Chair.
We're going to do, we're just going to ask members for any recommendations.
Yes. Recommendations and findings for the report.
Wasima, I'd just like to request a report from the department on the list of the grievances, please, man. On all the disciplinary matters and the findings, please.
Chairperson?
Yeah.
In terms of the meeting that the DG referred to, where they are discussing the pay project for next year, I'm not sure if we will hear via the media, but if we could potentially get information on that plans as well, that will be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so
just so that we can inform others to apply, etc.
Okay, so we want the latest on the pay project, the latest report on the pay project, please. Member Dagmar, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if we could please get the monthly breakdown of the top 10 issues that were reported into the contact center, because it's indicated there that they compiled a list of the top 10 issues every month. So during this annual report year, if we could have what were the 10 top issues per month for the duration of this year. And then if we could also request that the department provides us with their target in regard to the number of people in the province accessing internet each month. They indicated that they conceded that they didn't have a target, but that they were going to come up with a target, because I think it's actually quite a concern that literally only 1.7% of the people in our province are accessing the internet via these 630 hotspots, which is a concern to me. And then also, if you could have a copy of the Council for Higher Education evaluation. There was reference made to that report that had been compiled. And that if we could also, in regard to the faith-based organizations, if we could have a list of the faith-based organizations that are involved, through the forum set up by the Department of the Premier, if we could, have that detail. Thank you, Chair. I think that's all. I'll come back if there's something else.
Thank you, Wasima. You've got that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Wasima, sorry, one thing I wanted to add, if we can just have the latest report on the department as soon as on the, how can I put it now? It's fine. Don't worry, I'll never think about it. Is there anything else that we need to conclude on the report, Wasima? I know you mentioned there was a different format or something.
Chair, no, I just wanted to ask the monthly breakdown of the 10 top issues. So it's for this financial year, because we...
No, for the year under review.
For the year under review, but per month. Remember they said that they got a list of top 10 issues every month. So for the year under review, for each month of that year.
Okay. Now, Chairperson, is this that if there's any findings that the members wants to bring out in the report, they must just also highlight that now.
Yeah.
Findings or concerns, Chairperson.
Yeah, Chair, I don't know what the other members feel, but I do think it is a concern that there is currently not a target set for the number of people in the province who gain access to the internet via the 630 hotspots, and a concern that the number of 120,000 per month is a low figure.
Chair, and then there's just minutes.
Okay, that's fine. If you can just go to the minutes of the previous meeting of the 27th. Can you put it up, Wasima?
Chair, sorry, could I just ask you, do you personally know when we're going to be dealing with section C and E of this report? Could you just, have you been told as the chair?
Yes, we're going to be dealing with that. It's on the, I think the 20th of January, I think.
Okay.
Around that time, Member Dagmar, around that time. They put aside that whole week for SCOPA section.
Good day, Chairperson Lizette.
Lizette.
C&D, it starts on Monday, the 25th of January.
Oh, 25th, okay.
Until Friday, the 29th of January. So that whole week has been set aside for the financials.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We can go down to the minutes, yeah? Okay, so they are still going to send some of this stuff, yeah. Okay, can we have a mover and a shaker for this report, please?
Yes, propose acceptance of the minutes.
Second, the Chair.
Thank you. Okay, that's the last minutes, right, Wasima?
Yes, Chairperson, that concludes for the year.
Thank you, Chairperson. Colleagues, thank you very much for the year. It's been a very productive year under extremely difficult circumstances. And I want to thank all of you for your participation in making this committee really what it is. All your inputs is always valuable, and it really assists us greatly in conducting oversight over the Department of the Premier. And I really want to thank Wasima for all her help in making this committee happen. It's really been a great stalwart of this parliament, and she really provides great assistance and always available for contacting for help. So is Lizette Kluter, who's the senior stalwart of this parliament. Thank you for all your help, and thank you for really for your preparations in getting committees going. As we all know, committees are the engine room of parliament. I always say this is where the magic happens, and it won't happen if you don't have the appropriate support structures. And Wasima, thank you as always, and Lizette for your really hard work in making this happen. And to our normal support, thank you very much. Clarence, thank you for helping. Always our IT department, I say it again, is really top class, and they always make sure that we are on top of our hands, and to those who are not here today who regularly helps us also sometimes, Siraj and Candice and everybody else, just express our gratitude and our thanks. Clarence, we do really appreciate it. Members Dagmar, Ellen, Brunkes, Philander, thank you, and thank you for making this meeting happen. I do appreciate it. This is the last committee we're going to be in for this meeting, for this Standing Committee of Premier and Constitutional Matters. Wear a mask, stay safe, enjoy the festive season with your families, and have a lovely time. And I'll see you all in the new year, colleagues. And be safe out there, and please wear a mask and sanitize your hands. This meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the Wasima
Thank you very much.
and Lizette. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Cheerio. Bye.
Members.
Bye. Wait. Bye.